Good evening, everyone. I'm calling the Housing Authority of the City of Salem meeting for Monday, November 25th, open. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Commissioner Stapleton?
Here.
Vice Chair Phillips?
Here.
Commissioner Gwynn?
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Here.
Commissioner Hoy?
Here.
Commissioner Nordyke?
Here.
Commissioner Varney?
Here.
Resident Commissioner Villegas absent. Chair Nishioka?
I'm here, thank you. I have asked Member Varney to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Vice Chair Phillips, are there any additions or deletions?
Not tonight.
Thank you. We do not have any public comment. So Vice Chair, do you have a motion?
I move the consent calendar.
Second.
Tonight's consent calendar consists of item 3.1A, the October 28th, 2024 draft urban, oops, I'm on the wrong one. Yep, I just flipped my pages, apologize. And here we are. I have misplaced mine. Yeah, thank you. So sorry. Okay, here we go. 3.1A, the September 9th, 2024. No, am I on the wrong one still?
Yeah, so how about if I make the motion?
Yeah, sure. I had it in front of me, and now I've disappeared it.
For the consent calendar, 3.1A is the October 28th, 24 draft Housing Authority minutes. And we have had the motion by Member Nishioka and, by Vice Chair Phillips and seconded by Member Varney. And will the recorder please call the roll?
Vice Chair Phillips?
Found it. This is the one. I found
That's
it.
the one. Good.
Vice Chair Phillips?
Yes.
Commissioner Gwynn?
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoy?
Aye.
Commissioner Nordyke?
Aye.
Commissioner Varney?
Aye.
Commissioner Stapleton?
Aye.
President Commissioner Villegas absent. Chair Nishioka?
Aye. Thank you. We do not have any action items, resolutions, or public hearings, or special orders of business. We are now to Ms. Utes for information reports. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Nicole Utes. I'm the Housing Administrator for Salem Housing Authority. And I did want to just point out that we did make some changes to our program management report to also highlight some of our great staff that work at the Housing Authority, as well as one of our goals is to highlight one of our properties that we, of the 14 different developments that we have throughout our portfolio. This month, you'll see that Parkway East and West are highlighted in there, which is one that many people don't even recognize as one of our Housing Authority owned and operated projects. That was actually built in 1997. It was a turnkey project and purchased immediately by the Housing Authority. In 2014 and 15, that project was fully renovated. And it's been performing amazing since then. It's homes to about over 300 to 400 children at any given time. It's 124 units in total on both sides. There's actually an imaginary line down the middle of that property. Sometimes when we get really creative and unique in doing our developments, we have to split them off and have two different investment portfolios. But as you drive down the Martin Luther King Parkway, this one is directly across from Capital Auto area, and it's not very well known, this little hidden gem of ours, and it's just at the very end of the City of Salem border. And we are the proud partners with that one on that project, and we have been able to maintain it for quite a few years, and it's been a wonderful opportunity for many affordable families to live at that site. We do accept vouchers there, but it is all affordable based rent. It is not a subsidized complex. So So we wanted to highlight that this month. There is some additional information and some before and after photos of Yaquina Hall in there as well. Our goal is to be able to provide you a little bit more information on our portfolio, because one of the common things that we do here is that we tend to put all of our projects into one area, and I can guarantee you that we have affordable housing sites all throughout the city of Salem and into Kaiser. And so they're all throughout the various areas of our town. You'll see that Justin West is our Employee of the Month this month. Wanted to explain a little bit of this. We really wanted to take pride in that the peers are the ones that are nominating their Employee of the Month at the Housing Authority. In our first month, we started at mid-October and opened up a survey for all of our staff to submit anything that they felt their peers would showed and excelled upon in the duties that they do at the Housing Authority. We did ask them for some specific criteria, including empathy, responsiveness, knowledge, clear communication, personalization, consistency, follow-up, and problem solving. We really highlight our innovative thinkers at the Housing Authority. So Justin West is a newer employee who came to us, and he is one of our only resident service operators, and he is based out of Yaquina Hall, but supports Sequoia Crossings and Redwood Crossings. He had multiple staff members that wanted to highlight the great work that he does, his positive, innovative thinking, and that he really strives to help our residents when they need a little additional help. And he likes to bring a lot of comedy and humor to the Housing Authority, which they really appreciate, because the job is very difficult that they do at these locations, and it just really highlights that you can be a positive influence on a lot of people. So he had multiple, but we did have 14 different nominations. Our Employee of the Month will receive the Challenge Coin. For the outgoing commissioners, we did add onto your desk tonight the Salem Housing Authority Challenge Coin. We want to highlight your exemplary service to our agency, and thank you. I know you have another month, but we wanted to make sure we were able to grab you while you were here and show our appreciation for all the time that you've spent with us with the Housing Authority. I've also been asked to speak a little bit about our special programs outreach team. I wanted to highlight that they did collaborate with Oak Park Church of the God into doing the Share event, which many of you have probably heard about. This is quite a feat to pull off, but it was, this church is in Northeast Lancaster, across from the Walmart area. And every Thursday, they provide meals in this location from 10 to 2 p.m., or I'm sorry, 11 to 2 p.m. every Thursday. There were 14 different agencies at this. 140 meals were served. 50 warming and hygiene kits were supplied by the Housing Authority. And I wanted to highlight our very own Anna, who works in the special programs team. She actually completed an orientation the Tuesday before to all the staff that were volunteering, which we had 13 of our very own SHA staff between maintenance and property management, Section 8, all the various departments that showed up to this so that they could understand what to expect on engagement for this area of town. And so they are excited for their next one is going to be during the pit count time in January, and they're already starting to plan that. So, and I'm open to any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Member Stapleton.
Thank you. And you just somewhat answered my question. So the pit count, this last year we did not do it, but it sounds like we are on track to do it again. And who would people contact if they wanted to participate and help us with that process? And do you know what day?
I do not know the exact day, but I'll be happy to bring that back to you in December. The Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance is taking the lead on this, and I do know that we have several of our SHA staff. Very own Sarah Quick, the Special Programs Manager, is one of the key players in this in helping to educate and plan for it. So we'll definitely bringing it back. We hope to encourage more volunteers, but we are excited that we will be putting on another Share event because that also helps draw out individuals. And we were able to complete 12 new assessments through we call it our shambulance. The SHA ambulance is fully outfitted to be able to do that in the field in the moment and not have to have them come in the office. So,
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Member Gwen.
So I noticed towards the end of the packet, it says, Nicole Oots embarked on her inspiring journey with the Salem Housing Authority 20 years ago. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to ask, so when's your actual anniversary date?
I believe that's October 4th, 2004, quite a while ago. But yes, I was hired for Parkway East and West. It was actually private property management, and they brought it back into the Housing Authority, and I was hired to take that venture along. Thank you.
Well, thank you for all of your great service. And it looks like there aren't any other questions, so this Housing Authority is adjourned.
I'll call to order this meeting of the City of Salem Urban Renewal Agency for Monday, November 25th, 2024. If the recorder will please call the roll.
Board Member Stapleton?
Here.
Board Member Nishioka?
Here.
Board Member Phillips?
Here.
Board Member Gwen?
Here.
Board Member Gonzalez?
Here.
Board Member Hoy?
Here.
Board Member Nordike?
Here.
Board Member Varney?
Here.
Chair Hoy?
Here. Councilor Nishioka, do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
We do not.
Public comment? Nobody has signed up for public comment for the Urban Renewal Agency. Councilor Nishioka, the consent calendar.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Phillips. Councilor, to your motion.
Yes, the consent calendar consists of 3.1A, which is the October 28th, 2024 draft Urban Renewal Agency minutes. And that completes the consent calendar.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Board Member Gonzalez?
Aye.
Board Member Hoy?
Aye.
Board Member Nordike?
Aye.
Board Member Varney?
Aye.
Board Member Stapleton?
Aye.
Board Member Nishioka?
Aye.
Board Member Phillips?
Aye.
Board Member Gwen?
Aye.
Chair Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. We have no public hearings. We have no special orders of business. We do have an information report. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Or Mrs. Rutherford, did you have anything on that? No?
No.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments? All right. Seeing no further business before the Urban Renewal Agency, we're adjourned. Call to order this meeting of the Salem City Council for Monday, November 25th, 2024. If the recorder will please call the roll.
Counselor Stapleton?
Here.
Counselor Nishioka?
Still here.
Counselor Phillips?
Here.
Counselor Gwen?
Here.
Counselor Gonzalez?
Here.
Counselor Hoy?
Here.
Counselor Nordike?
Here.
Counselor Varney?
Here.
Mayor Hoy?
Here. All right. Councilor Nishioka, additions or deletions to the agenda?
Yes, we do. We have an addition for
Motion, please.
yes, we do. I move for approval of the additions to the report.
Second.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Stapleton. Councilor?
Yes, we have an addition to the report 5B that we would like to have brought forward.
It's a real key correction that
It's
was
a
made.
real key correction,
On
and
which
it's-
option staff is recommending. So be
Yes.
sure to note that if you hadn't looked at that already, councilors.
So it changes the recommended motion option number.
The staff report was all correct. It was just on the agenda, the number was wrong. So everything you read in the staff report, I think, is accurate. It's just that the agenda had the wrong option number on it. Is there any further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Stapleton?
Aye.
Counselor Nishioka?
Aye.
Counselor Phillips?
Aye.
Counselor Gwen?
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez?
Aye.
Counselor Hoy?
Aye.
Counselor Nordike? Aye. Counselor Varney?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. All right, it's now time for council and city manager comments. Do we have any? Councilor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention that the neighborhood associations Fayrite and Morningside have submitted a traffic request to have no left-hand turns from Triangle onto Commercial Street. And this is similar to what happened further south on Commercial at Royvon and Commercial. Both those neighborhood associations have written letters. Their boards have voted on it. I believe the support was unanimous from both neighborhood associations. And I've spoken with staff who are aware of that and have moved it to the next process for public notification and review. But I'm very hopeful that we will get progress on that. In both of these two locations, there's a new pedestrian crossing across Commercial, which creates some unique, geometry. And I think limiting left-hand turns when you've got a nearby pedestrian crossing just makes sense. It's safer and more simple for pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles, so all modes of traffic. And I appreciate staff, getting it escalated to the right next step, and thank everybody for being involved in advocating for a safer, better future for all of us.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you so much, Mayor. After 7 years, we had a celebration of the new war memorial for the Vietnam War down at the state capitol. I was there with the mayor and with Council President Nishioka. Maybe others were there. Oh, I think Nordyke was there, but I didn't get to talk to you. It was packed. It was so much fun. It was really a great mix of seriousness over what we were doing, but also celebrating the lives and the people in our community. So that was wonderful. I also got to go to the Transgender Day of Remembrance here at the library, and I wanted to thank staff for putting that on every year. It's a very sobering event, but one that it's an honor to attend. And so thank you for your time and effort in putting that together. I believe the Human Rights Commission as well is very active in that. So thank you to them as well for putting that together.
Thank you, Councilor. Are there further comments? Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it was lovely seeing you and so many wonderful people at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Service. It was really cool. So I won't belabor that point. I think it's wonderful that we happen to have that statewide memorial right here in Salem's backyard. What I want to do is, between now and a lot of tough budgetary decisions we have to make, is really point out some highlights from the amazing staff who work with us every single day. A lot of folks don't know what the staff do every single day to keep our city beautiful, livable, and there's a reason why people continue to move here in droves. But a lot of this work goes unseen. So I just want to highlight a few things from our city manager's recent email that he sent around to councilors with his updates. The Compliance Services Division, ever heard of them? So these are just some of the unsung heroes around the city of Salem. The councilors here all know who they are because they are incredible people. Now, they handle all kinds of violations that do not rise to a criminal level, but nonetheless impact the livability of the city. For example, derelict buildings, housing code violations, illegal home occupations, zoning issues, public nuisances, work without permits, vehicle storage area violations, hazardous trees, garbage accumulation, fence violations, and so on. In the month of October, the Compliance Services Division processed 334 complaint cases, and they were able to finalize or close 277 cases. One of which was in my backyard, Croson Creek Road, which is where I grew up. There was a property that was posted as derelict in August of '24 due to squatters taking over the property. And the property became a dumping ground for garbage and all kinds of debris, and a location for derelict vehicles and motorhomes with individuals living in them to congregate. But that was before our Officer Romano got a hold of the case, and she went to town and diligently worked on enforcing the laws on the books. So this code compliances is just one of the divisions in the city government that most of the people don't know. But when they look at issues in their neighborhood, that should be your first phone call for a lot of the quality of life issues that you bring to me or Councilor Hoy or Councilor Phillips or any of the councilors here or the mayor itself. A lot of these issues can be effectively and, dare I say it, deftly handled by our compliance services. The only other thing I will briefly mention We regularly get statistics from our library. And last week, 12,173 items were checked out from the Salem Public Library. Last week, they had 6,305 visitors and hosted 6 different events inside the library, attended by 286 people. Just another week in the life of 2 of our incredible divisions who do monumental work with residents all over our city. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors. Are there further councilor comments? Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. I also just want to say that I was honored to attend the Vietnam War Memorial. And I know that it took several years, but it is beautiful, and I hope people have the opportunity to go visit it. I also had the pleasure of going to the retirement party for the Parks and Recs Becky George on Friday afternoon. That was very nice. People came through and were expressing their appreciation for all the work that she has done. I think it was 30 years. So that was very nice. And then I also attended the Empty Bowls, which helps the Marion County Food Bank. And so that was something that was well attended, and I was glad to be there and contributing.
Thank you, Counselor. Further comments? All right. Let's see. We have no proclamations or presentations. We're on to public comment. Just as a reminder to everybody who's signed up tonight, you have 3 minutes. When I call your name, step up to the podium. Be sure and hit the button so the green light comes on. Introduce yourself with your address or your ward. When the yellow light starts to flash, that means you have a minute left. When the red light comes on, that means your time is up. Please end your comments at that time. We have a lot of folks signed up tonight, so we're gonna be fairly, I don't want to say strict, but we're going to be following the time close tonight. So we'll get started and just go down this list. First up, we have Luann Watson. Thank you. I hit that button. There you go. And pull that microphone a little closer to you. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Luann Watson. I've lived in Salem for 25 years, Ward 6. I'm speaking tonight on the behalf of Center 50 Plus seniors, many of whom could not be here tonight due to mobility issues or health issues or time of day. Center 50 Plus is a vibrant community of 50 to 90-year-olds. I became involved in the center after I retired and after COVID. At first, I was invited by a friend to an event, and then I went to a class or two that were of interest to me. Well, one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was a volunteer and also serve on the board. I've gotten to know the staff and have seen that it is not just a job for them, but a true passion to serve the seniors of Salem and facilitate services that enrich the life of seniors in a multitude of ways. Seniors come from different backgrounds, religions, cultures, education, financial resources, housing options, etc., yet all deserve to be treated with respect and inclusion in society. Center 50 Plus in many ways bridges these differences and offers services for all individuals that seek them. The center also has a tremendous outreach to those actually shut in and living in facilities. It only takes one look at our program guide to see how vast and varied our services are. Just about every senior can find something that interests them. Engaging and interacting in activities has shown to improve health issues and ward off dementia and depression. The last U.S. Census showed about 20% of individuals in this country are over 65 years old, many in the best years of their lives. They are not to be marginalized or forgotten. I encourage the council to think of the older adults in their lives, fathers, mothers, grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts and uncles, and the generations to come in their upcoming decisions about levies and budget and the future of Center 50 Plus. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sue Ballard.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Sue Ballard, and I live in Kaiser. I'm here to tell you about my love of Center 50 Plus. The Center 50 Plus building, with all of its activities, participants, staff, and volunteers, are truly a gem of this city. There's so many activities that even the staff probably can't list them all. Not only does the center provide fun and games, but important services. The kitchen provides meals on wheels, in-house and by delivery. There is respite care, outreach of numerous kinds, such as helping us know how to navigate through retiring, being caregivers, gaining a community to age in place, how to manage our health, and so many other needs. The many services and activities of the center help to keep us not only active, but stave off depression and isolation. Some need to seek help from outside agencies. These agencies are beyond capacity, and 50 Plus provides a place to be mentally and physically healthy or assist to find help if needed. 50 Plus runs with many volunteers, but the center cannot survive without staff. Marilyn Daly is a wonderful, tireless director, but so are her staff. They are the arms and legs. I worked for the City of Salem for 25 years in both finance and urban development, interacting with many of the other departments. The staff at 50 Plus are the most dedicated employees I've seen. They are on the ground running all day, every day, sometimes nights and weekends. I challenge you to visit the center and spend some time seeing what goes on and talking with those that visit the center and value what the City of Salem is providing. As a resident of Kaiser, I cannot vote for a levy for the City of Salem, but there are many, many friends at Center 50 Plus that can, and seniors are the highest group of voters, so please support the center. I hope that when you want to take advantage of Center 50 Plus, it's there for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ken Simila.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. I would like to speak on item 5D, and I'm pleased to see on page 5 of the tonight's agenda the recommendation and summary of the Salem Budget Committee motion about regarding a 5-year operating levy for
I
the library.
apologize for interrupting you, sir, but could you be sure and introduce yourself with either your address or your ward?
Excuse me, yes. And my name is Ken Simila. I'm in Ward 1 on the corner of 20th and Madison Northeast, 1810.
Thank you.
And I've been a resident of Salem and the Northeast neighbors area for 74 years, but the 10 years outside of Oregon in addition to that. But I'm very familiar with Salem, and I have some surprising statistics from the U.S. Census that is on a sheet I believe each of you may have. The census data for 12 years from 2000, and it relates to the Center 50 Plus. The U.S. Census Bureau puts population data into 6 age groups. And you can see on the sheet, if you look under A, B, C, D, E, et cetera, the 2 groups that mostly affect Center 50 Plus are the E group, 50 to 64 years of age, and F group, the Census Bureau's grouping of 65 plus age. Below that, there is a list of what the growth in all of those 6 categories has been during the past 12 years, according to census data for Marion County. And it's surprising to see that young children are shrinking in our population. It went down 14%, but if you look at the bottom one, the 65 plus seniors in our area have increased 43.5%. And if there isn't a reason for maintaining support for a senior center, it's when the seniors in our area are growing at a much faster rate than some of the other age groups. So I'm very pleased to request action be taken based on the staff recommendation and come up with a 5-year community services levy to be supporting both parks, library, and the 50-plus center. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Karen Bolliger. They should restart it. Go ahead.
Well, my name is Karen Bolliger, and I'm the president of the Friends of Center 50 Plus Board. And I'd like to address tonight Honorable Mayor Chris Hoy, Mayor-elect Julie Hoy, Salem City Council, and the City of Salem Budget Committee. On November 21st, that was last week, at the Friends Board meeting, the board voted strongly to encourage the City of Salem's continued support of the center. Center 50 Plus is extremely important to the senior population of Salem for the following reasons. We combat senior isolation and loneliness by sponsoring over 200 classes and activities. To encourage healthy eating by offering Meals on Wheels and an in-house dining room. Foster fitness and physical activity with a fitness center, including trainers and classes. Interest-driven activities such as a lapidary shop, woodworking shop, tech desk, and a sewing club. A respite program to help caregivers so that Alzheimer and dementia patients can remain in their own homes. The nationally recognized Wellness on Wheels van, or WOW van, that brings the center's programs out to the community. We are also proud to be fiscally partnering with the City of Salem. The Friends of Center 50 Plus annually raise $200,000 in direct support by advertising, marketing, patron relations, and events. In addition, the Friends allocate $125,000 to the city to support center operations. This money is from our own fundraising, such as Cup of Joe and Boot, Scoot, and Brew. Our building endowment, which began at $0, is now just over $500,000. The center welcomes 700 people per day for classes, camaraderie, and companionship. The population 65 and older is the fastest growing demographic. In order to promote healthy aging, a robust infrastructure is essential. On behalf of all 12 members of the Friends of Center 50 Plus Board, 15,000 members of the center, I encourage you to give careful consideration to support these worthwhile activities of Center 50 Plus to combat senior isolation and loneliness and to encourage productive and healthy aging. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Zoe Harper and also Megan Harper. If they want to come together, they're welcome to do that. Could you help with the green light there, Counselor-elect? Awesome.
My name is Zoe Harper. I live in Ward 4. Please move forward with the 5-year levy. I have been to the library many times with my family, and it is one of my favorite places to go. Books are important to me because I love reading, and I have done many things at the library, and I really like going there, and it is one of my favorite places in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. Next up is Megan.
My name is Megan
Could you
Harper.
lift up that microphone a little bit, please?
Yeah.
There you go.
My name is Megan Harper, and I also live in Ward 4. Zoe is my incredible oldest child, and I'm so proud of her and her siblings. My first outing out of my house alone after Zoe was born was when she was 2 weeks old. My sister-in-law invited me to story time at the library. So of course I wanted to be prepared to go. So I had her car seat and a stroller and a whole pack of diapers and 5 outfits in case she blew out of all of them, and probably a box of toys in case she got bored in half an hour. And it was wonderful to have that service there. But she was born in the early fall, and throughout my maternity leave, the days got shorter and darker, and I got more overwhelmed. I loved her so much, but I was deeply unsure of myself. One day I had remembered coming to the library with my sister-in-law for story time, and I thought, maybe I should go to the library and walk around, get a book, get out of the house a little bit. And what happened was I encountered so many people who stopped me and said, "Oh my gosh, what an adorable baby girl. You're doing such a good job." And just that interaction made that darkness lift. If you've been a parent, that darkness of the first weeks and months as you're getting used to the whole new thing. So we've heard a lot about how libraries are opportunity and how libraries are community and they are public safety. For me, they were also public health and public mental health. And so I'm asking you to please move forward with the 5-year operating levy.
Thank you. Excellent job, Zoe, and to your mom as well. You both did great. All right, next up we have Evan West. I'm assuming she takes your name.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hoy, members of council. I'm Evan West, a citizen of Ward 7. I don't like most of what I wrote, so I'm going to go off script a little bit. Just want to urge you to be cautious in returning time and time again to local levy options. It seems to me that the citizens of our community have regularly said that they're not likely to support new property tax increases. And this council has a variety of options to consider when it comes to funding, including all of the work that was done by the Revenue Task Force recently. Citizens met for months to put forward many suggestions for funding that were likely to be supported by the public. So please remember not to casually disregard the work that was done by that task force. But regardless of the funding source, I'm here to join the many voices tonight that are asking you to remember that our parks and library and other recreation services, including Center 50 Plus, are essential to community health. The existing general fund budget should be dedicated to funding these services, while a property tax vote should deal with what the public has said they're marginally more likely to support, which is a public safety tax increase. It's essential that this council does not plunder the treasures of our public places in order to create a police state in our community. Remember that we could replace every staff position with a police officer, and our community would be no more secure than it is today. Services that make our community livable are an irremovable part of the equation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up is Christy Kemper Hodge.
Thank you. We've got first-class assistants here. Good evening. My name is Christy Kemper Hodge. I live in Ward 6. And forgive me, I am going to read my notes. And I'm here tonight as a community member concerned. Is this cutting in and out?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. It sounds different from right here. Concerned about the stability of funding for our public library, where I work as the Teen Services librarian. When we consider whether to fund the public library or whether it can sustain further cuts than it already has, or when we talk about choosing to fund either the public library or public safety, my experience working in libraries leads my mind to thoughts like these. Public libraries are a part of public safety in a very tangible way. Community members may not be aware of the times that library staff call an ambulance because someone visiting the library is having a medical emergency. They may not know the number of times a teen librarian such as myself has had to ask a teen if they are suicidal, only to have them confide in me that they are or that a friend is. And so we can work together to figure out what resources they need to face their mental health challenges or help their friends. I think about the teens especially who hang out at the library during the day, completing online classes or reading or escaping an abusive or unsafe home, or studying or being with friends or meeting new people. And I wonder where those teens would go if there was no public library to welcome them and to make space for them. Salem residents have really shown up for the community wellness this fall by providing donations of items to meet basic human needs for our Take What You Need project. Since early October, we have received more than $3,000 worth of in-kind donations of hats, gloves, hand warmers, diapers, period supplies, and so much more that we then distribute in the restrooms at the library for anyone who needs them, obviously at no cost. My point is, as you are making decisions about library funding and for any community centers, as we have heard with Center 50 Plus, and services funded by the city's general fund, please remember that these are not separate from public safety and are instead inextricably intertwined with it. I urge you to please take measures to ensure library funding is not further diminished, whether or not a local levy is pursued and whether or not it passes. I guess I already said whether or not. Whether it passes or doesn't, please ensure there is funding for us. Our community deserves the preventative community safety measures we provide by investing in library services. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have David Levy.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is David Levy, and I live in Ward 3. I actually am wearing two hats this evening. First, I am the chair of the Salem Library Advisory Board, and then I'm also a citizen, so I'm going to speak on behalf of both issues. First of all, the Salem Public Library Advisory Board met 2 weeks ago and voted unanimously to recommend both to the Budget Committee and to City Council, as well as to the Mayor, to fund at least for FY 25 and 26, the current funding level for the library. We strongly believe that the library at this point, for the reasons that were already discussed, should not and cannot face additional cuts. The Salem Library Advisory Board will probably not be meeting until January, so they haven't taken an official position on the levy. But I will tell you, as a private citizen, that I strongly support the levy, and I think a majority of the members support the levy, with the understanding that the levy provides an opportunity not to maintain the library and Center 50 and parks the way they are, but what those organizations should look like in the future. So I would strongly encourage you, at bare minimum, if you're going to look at doing a levy, that you fund it at no less than what the library was looking like in 2022, which was open 6 days a week and had hours open until 7 o'clock. If you have a chance to go to the library, you'll see there's lots of people there all day for the reasons people talked about. People are using computers, people are going to story time, people are finding jobs, people are finding housing. There's lots of opportunities there. And we have heard, as members of the Library Advisory Board, stories of people that can't get to the library by 6 o'clock or can't get to the library by 5 o'clock. So they don't have access to finding housing or a job or things to go. So that additional hour is extremely important to them. The other thing I wanted to mention is just do a shout out to city staff. They've worked closely with the advisory board as well as library stakeholders to try to figure out how those of us in the private sector, both with the Friends and Foundation, can help the library through these difficult times. So I want to do a shout out to both Scott and to Bridget for their help on this. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Fraser Wick.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor and City Council. My name is Fraser Wick, and my address is 4811 20th Avenue. If you don't know where that's at, I share a backyard with Shirley Elementary, so get soccer balls and baseballs kicked over all the time. I'm here today to kind of talk about something I don't think has been discussed yet, which is a little bit about that location itself in regards to this proposal, and I'll get there. I just want to mention, for me, a coffee shop is about a 1 hour walk. To go to the library, that's a 30-minute bus ride. The YMCA, 30-minute bus ride. or bike ride. Croc Center, that's 22-minute drive from my place. And while, sure, that's my issue where I chose to live, we are continuing to see expansion in South Salem. Yet we don't have any of the amenities that more central and northern Salem has. And I think that's just something to think about when we think about this levy. I think that I fully support the library funding, and I think the senior center is great. But I would just add, what else can we do? I know at this time with the city's budget where it's at, it's a hard ask. But where do we want to be at in 5 years? Where do we want to be at in 10 years? And I think something that we should consider with that is the idea of community building and community centers. So where can we have in each? Maybe it's each ward. Is there ability in this levy or in a future planning opportunity to think about community centers and having it more open for communities, more local areas where we can have forum. I think that would help with, in previous meetings we've had talked about divisiveness in the city, and I think community is our currency. So I would just add that if there's any option, I know I'm probably a little late in the public planning phase of this levy, but if there is any way to add in some sort of planning opportunity to help fund this vision, I would just offer that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jim Shepke.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors. Jim Shepke, Ward 2, representing Fund Our Libraries. I sent you some written testimony on item 5D about the library, and I hope you had a chance to look at it. Of course, we support the staff recommendation to hold a work session on January 21st to hopefully craft a local option levy that might find favor with voters next May. The staff report, however, did raise questions and concerns for us that we hope to hear about in your deliberations tonight. Most importantly, the staff report seems to be suggesting a levy that would result in a $6.5 million budget for the library that it calls the enhanced budget. As I stated in my testimony, we would like to hear what that enhanced budget would fund. And I appreciate that having sent that in today, I heard from Mr. Archer here about this, and he indicated to me that the so-called enhanced budget would support an increase from 38 hours per week to 52 hours per week at the main library, and an increase from 10 hours a week to 30 hours per week at the West Salem branch. He offered to meet with us, and we will take him up on that offer to have that meeting. We think there would be a way to have the main library open 7 days a week with 3 evenings a week if it were funded for 52 hours a week. And that would be a big selling point for any levy campaign. But we still want to see more detail about other aspects of the so-called enhanced budget, like the all-important book budget. And I can't help but be a little skeptical because the Beaverton Library is open 56 hours, the main library, only 4 hours more. And their expenditures last year were $11.6 million, considerably more than the enhanced budget. So we want to see the details. But I do thank Mr. Archer, and I thank you for having this deliberation tonight, and I thank the staff for proposing to continue the deliberation in January. If we thought there was going to be a levy campaign, we would probably need to get started on it right away. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Matt Hale.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, councilors. I'm Matt Hale. I'm from Ward 4, and so I don't forget, I want to wish you all a safe and wonderful Thanksgiving later on this week. We're Well, I recently heard of the huge increase in PERS payments that our city is on the hook for from the chief financial officer in an article in the Salem Reporter, and the possibility of another local option levy bond measure. I decided to read the most recent DHM survey results. And I'm hoping that we can find a way to post those so they're easily available for the community to find them on our website. I had to dig through some material to find them, and they're not in the news area of the city website where I was hoping to find them. I also searched for them and I couldn't find them either. I spoke with several neighbors recently, and what I heard was a lack of trust in our city's ability to spend tax dollars, and that they continue to feel very stretched with the effects of inflation and high taxes. Most of you are aware that according to the Citizen Utility Board, we're expecting a 10.9% increase in our Portland General Electric utility rates on January 1st of this coming year. So this is just another challenge that we as a city and we as citizens face with balancing our household budgets and our city budget. But we have to, as households and residents, make difficult choices each and every day. And I believe the voters expect the city to make difficult choices too. So I urge you to fight for the city of Salem and their residents and develop a reasonable and balanced budget based on cuts to needless expenditures and possibly a reasonable ask for increased revenue. But before you consider asking for that increased revenue, I would ask you to, one, without delay, advocate to our upcoming legislative session the need for immediate and lasting payment in lieu of taxes for the state property that the state owns in the city of Salem. Second, ask our city employees to start sharing the burden of their PERS retirement cost by asking them to contribute to their individual account program payments. I did that as a state employee. I think others can do that as well. And then start cutting some of the wasteful spending that we have in the budget. And last, I ask you to support a robust volunteer program in our city library. I would be happy to be a volunteer at the city library, but I think we need that support from the council. We need that support from the mayor. But before I finish, please take note of those DHM polling results where they said, although a majority of voters oppose all levy options, they prioritize public safety over community livability levy. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mallory Turner. Hit that button for me so the microphone comes on. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Hoy, Salem City Council, City Manager Stolley, and Attorney Atchison. My name is Mallory Turner. I'm a resident of Ward 1, a current Master's of Social Work student at Pacific University, and a practicum student at Center 50+. I'm speaking to you about the consideration of adding a 5-year operating levy to our May 2025 ballots. I encourage you to vote in favor of moving this along through the process to getting it on our ballots. And although this isn't my first recommendation, if you're unable to support all of the services on the levy or on that proposed levy, I would advocate to remove the library enhanced services if it is between that and cutting Center 50+ from that levy. And while I'm a big advocate of the library and I really want to see those services enhanced, especially as a student, I do not think that we should risk the closure of another well-loved city resource in favor of expanding an already existing, although very minimal, service. And as a young adult in Salem, I would be happy to contribute towards community livability services. I even look forward to when I can use Center 50 Plus services in about 20 years. And while I've been told that that time will fly by, if the center doesn't remain a priority to our city, it doesn't matter how fast that time goes for me. By 2060, it's projected that there will be 94.7 million older adults in the United States. And according to 2020 data, Oregon's population of adults 65 years and older is 18.6%, which puts Oregon in the 11th highest ranking of states who have the highest percentage of older adults. Investing in Center 50 Plus is not just for our current senior community, but for all of us. In 2060, I will be 65. And before that, in 2045, I will be 50. Please make the decision that will invest in not only our current seniors' future, but also mine and the many other younger people who hope to call Salem home for many years. Please prioritize Center 50 Plus in this and ongoing conversations. And will you, as our elected officials, stand in support of our community's senior center? Please reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment for items on our agenda. So we will now move on to consent calendar. Councilor Nishioka.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Hoy. I move for approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Phillips. Councilor?
Yes, thank you. The consent calendar consists of a 3.1A, November 12th, 2024 draft City Council minutes, and 3.1B, November 18th, 2024 draft City Council work session minutes. And item 3.3A, which is the adoption of the final order number 2024-4 CU 2405, modifying the hearing officer's decision approving conditional use permit case number CU 24-05 for property located at 3393 Silverton Road. That concludes the consent calendar.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Nishioka.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Gwynn.
Aye.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Mayor Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. We have no public hearings this evening. We are on to special orders of business. Item 5A, call up John Pascal, our airport manager.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. John Pascal, Airport Manager, along with Jack Penning, Managing Partner of Volair Aviation Consulting. We'll be sharing some details with you this evening about our first year of commercial air service in Salem and a look ahead as we fully anticipate commercial air service in Salem to grow. And Jack will also touch on some industry updates. But first, I want to thank the Mayor, the Council, and City leadership once again for their unwavering support of commercial air service and providing the funding necessary to renovate the terminal, get TSA operational, and to hire a staff of amazing individuals that keep the airport running smoothly on a daily basis. Without your vision, support, and financial resources, air service could not have become a reality. In the first 12 months of operations, beginning October 5th of last year and ending September 30th of this year, the airport processed approximately 55,000 passengers through our terminal, with approximately half of those being visitors to the valley. And Jack's going to touch on some more information on what that means for the local economy. You may recall from previous presentations that the 10,000 enplaned passenger threshold is what's required for the FAA to consider us a primary commercial service airport, which then allows us to have almost 10 times the amount of grant funding that we've had in the past. We passed the 10,000 passenger enplanement threshold in June of this year. So beginning in 2026, we'll be eligible for those primary entitlements, which is a huge benefit. Mindful that that's for capital projects only. I get that question regularly. Additionally, our Revenue Guarantee Fund, which is a combination of the federal grant fund and then the community matching funds, remains healthy. At the halfway mark of the 2-year program, just over 1/3, about $445,000 of the available $1.2 million has been spent, leaving about $755,000 available for the final year. And Jack will touch on that a little bit as well. One area that staff continues to focus on is airport revenue versus expenses. While we're not yet at revenue neutral, we're working diligently towards increasing revenues, keeping expenses in check, so that we can close that funding gap. And we remain confident that the growth of commercial air service will eventually get us to revenue neutral and even net positive over the years. Any new flights generate incremental revenue without incremental expense to go with it. At the same time, staff is working on other revenue opportunities, including long-term land leases for hangars and businesses at the airport, embarking on a terminal advertising program, and then revamping our aircraft landing and parking fee program, which will be bringing some code changes back to council in January to amend that. So we're doing everything we can to maximize revenue because we recognize that there is a need to have the airport be financially self-sufficient. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jack Penning, and I guarantee you that his presentations are much more interesting than mine. So.
Thank you, John, and thank you, all of you, for having me tonight, and thank you all for your hard work. It's rare that I have the opportunity as an air service development consultant to come and celebrate a success like this. I was talking earlier with staff. Topeka, Kansas is another state capital that has no air service, had no air service at the same time we secured service. And that community would love to be having the presentation that I'm about to give you tonight. And so these are the easy ones for me. We did the hard work and things are going really well. So with that, I'm Jack Penning. I am founder and owner of Volair Aviation Consulting. We represent Salem. We represent about 100 other communities around the country. We have airports the size of Salem, and we also work for Atlanta, Georgia, which is the largest in the world. So we have broad experience. But it's successes like the one we have to talk about tonight that really get us excited and our firm excited. Longtime Oregonian, lived in Portland for 25 years. So understand the community. I'm going to do this quickly because I know you have a lot on your agenda, but I am going to talk about where we are today. What is kind of pushing against us, the headwinds that we're fighting right now and growing the service beyond what we have today, and how we see things playing out over the next couple of years as we work toward getting the airport fully self-sufficient, which is, we still believe, a very strong possibility as service increases. So let's start today. We've got 2 round trips a week to each Burbank and Las Vegas. Avelo Airlines is our carrier and our partner. They've been great partners for us. We do have extra flights during peak periods. For the holidays, we'll have extra flights. And the bookings, forward-looking bookings, are very, very strong for the holidays. We've hit a new passenger record. As John was pointing out, we are averaging about 117 passengers per flight, which is just terrific at this point. In just the second quarter, this is DOT verified, Department of Transportation verified data. We had 21,000 people get on and off the planes here just in that quarter. You compare that to what Delta did back in the 2008 timeframe, and we're doubling the number of people using the airport from when Delta was in the market. So we had a strategy for lower cost service to serve the entire Willamette Valley, and it is working. So that makes us all feel terrific. We have the lowest fare of any airport in the Pacific Northwest. This is the cheapest airport to fly in and out of in the entire Pacific Northwest. The average cost paid by a passenger is just $63 each way. That's remarkable. So our partner is making air travel accessible to a much broader group of passengers than has ever been possible in this part of Oregon. And that was another thing that we promised when we worked with this group, was that we would make air travel affordable. We have had 22,600 new visitors come to the Willamette Valley using our airport since this service started. 22,600. We're averaging 74 people a day that are flying to our airport, not originating here. They're originating in Burbank or Las Vegas and visiting this community. They could be seeing grandma and grandpa. They could be coming to go wine tasting. They could be coming to the coast. But that is a huge number of new people that are accessing the Willamette Valley. In July, we had over 3,300 new visitors come to this community using this service. And that, of course, has a massive economic impact. The state of Oregon does a terrific job with visitor data and understanding how much those visitors pay when they come to the communities, each individual community. Using that data and data from the IMPLAN software, which is an economic impact software, we're able to determine those new visitors have spent $19 million in our county. That's just in Marion County. $19 million in spend that never would have happened if this city didn't invest in its airport. That's the real payoff. This is money that's going to restaurants, it's going to shopping, it's going to all the things that people do when they come to Oregon. It's going to wineries, it's going to hotels. We're up to where we're almost $3 million a month in impact from this service. $3 million new dollars in our economy every single month. As John mentioned, I just want to point out, we've got 63% of the Revenue Guarantee Fund, which did not include any city funding whatsoever. This was Travel Salem, it was the Chamber, both of whom are here today, raising money from businesses in our community and then matched by a federal grant. So this is private investment. And we still have a significant amount of funding available, which ensures that we're in good position as we move forward for the remainder of the period, about another year that we're under contract. Now, why haven't flights increased more quickly? That's the biggest question I get when I'm meeting with everyone in the community. We all want flights every day, and we want a lot more cities, and we talked about other cities. There are headwinds we can't control in the industry, and I'll just briefly touch on what those are. We don't have the 737 MAX flying into Salem. We have the 737 previous generation, but it still impacts us. The grounding and the deliveries being slowed have caused the major carriers to hold on to their used aircraft longer, which means our carrier can't get its new aircraft deliveries as quickly as it anticipated. So Avelo is struggling with not being able to get aircraft it had scheduled for delivery. So it can't add flights if it doesn't have the planes. So that's slowing down our growth right now. It's the same problem with Airbus. So any carrier that's trying to get new aircraft and then lease its older aircraft is hanging on to those, and the domino effect is hurting us. There's simply not enough planes, and there are also not enough pilots because so many retired during the pandemic. So those have slowed us down, but our outlook is still very strong because our service is performing really, really well. Work has changed. Hybrid work is 30% of work. That's great for our type of service because people can travel on the days of the week when we have flights. We don't have flights every single day, but people are adjusting their schedule because they have flexibility now because work has changed. That fit our strategy absolutely perfectly. Also, the low-cost carriers are the fastest growing carriers. Avelo, our carrier, is growing by about 7.5% every single year. They're going to continue growing at that rate, which is good for us. The big carriers have not been growing at that rate. And Portland Air Service has been, as you all know, really decimated because Alaska hasn't been growing as quickly as they had hoped due to aircraft shortages and pilot shortages. So we've started our service in the perfect time, at least in terms of the regional air service atmosphere. And we do talk to these other carriers, especially the ones at the top of that chart that are growing very quickly, because we know they're looking for markets like Salem. Low-cost carriers like ours, Avelo, are now 14% of all the passengers carried. Go back to 2010, they were 5%. So we are partnered with the carriers that are going to grow and they're going to be more significant in the future. So our strategy is matching the fastest growing airline strategies in the country right now. We know we're retaining only 5% of the passengers that are available to our market. So this is just the Marion County market. If you look at how many passengers are available, we still have 95% of people driving to other airports. 95%. So we are scratching the surface of the potential of this market. That's another reason we are going to grow over time. So our top priorities haven't changed. We have our service to LA. We have our service to Las Vegas. We know we need Phoenix. Everyone tells us that. We know we need the Bay Area. The community tells us that as well. We have been meeting with carriers. In fact, we had a coalition, including John Pascal, and we had the Salem Chamber with us, and private business people who met with carriers in October in person. And so we've had some very good conversations about these specific markets and the possibility that may not just be Avelo serving our market, but others have interest. And so we're going to work diligently on those leads because we believe there's more opportunity here. You look, this chart's hard to read, but I just point out, we have many, many markets that have enough passengers to support service. You look at the number of passengers available per day, we have 96 people a day traveling from Salem, the immediate area, to Phoenix. 96 every single day. And these markets grow as we get service. And so these markets that are on this chart are the ones that we know we can recruit and that they can be successful. So with that, I will wrap up just with a final thought, and that is that air service development is a continual and consistent effort. We have to be visible to the carriers consistently. We have to meet with them. We have to talk about the market. But we have a great narrative now. It was very, very difficult. It took us almost a decade to get service into this airport. It's even harder to get the next carrier. So it doesn't mean it's going to take a decade, but it means we've got to work really hard in making sure that we're competitive with other places where those airplanes can go. Because a plane that can fly here could easily be flying from New Haven, Connecticut to Florida every day too. We've got to be better than those markets. And so we've got to use the service. And so far, people are using the service. The more we use the service, the more cities we will have service to. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Now we'll have some time for questions. I guess I'll give it a start. I think I read recently or heard a story recently that Redmond recently got daily service back to Portland, I'm wondering if there's that kind of expansion, which seems, I don't know, it seems like an interesting choice, daily service from Redmond to Portland. I'm wondering when we might be able to get something like maybe to Seattle or to San Francisco or to Salt Lake City or to Denver. Those seem like very key. If we could get to some place like that where there's a hub, where there's other opportunities to fly, that could be the key for us. What do you think the likelihood of that happening might be?
Yeah, so the Redmond service is just in the wintertime, and the thought there is that when the passes close, there's an avenue for people to get back and forth. So that's Alaska Airlines, for those who don't know. Before the pandemic, Alaska flew Redmond to Portland 4 times a day. Now they'll fly it daily only in the wintertime. So they're still way down in capacity. The regional side of the industry has been hurt the most by pilot shortages. So many regional pilots were able to get jobs at the major carriers, and so regionals have cut service tremendously. That's why Portland's been cut so deeply. We are starting to see the regionals stabilize. Once they stabilize and start hiring pilots again, I think that is very much on our radar. We understand that daily service is a top priority, especially for our business community. And we've continued to meet with the network carriers, but I think we're talking years down the road instead of months down the road with some of the other opportunities that are available.
Is that Redmond service, are those the smaller planes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those are the regional
Correct.
The other question I wanted to ask was about the MRG. And I know that I'm not the only person who thought that that MRG was going to be used to make up for empty seats on the plane. But I understand that maybe we're also supplementing low cost fare with our MRG. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that and whether we need to rethink that.
It's a little bit of both. So our revenue guarantee is a guarantee against the cost of operation. So we agreed with the carrier on what each segment would cost. And if the total amount of revenue on that segment is less, we have to pay the difference. So that's how the agreement works. There are two ways to get enough revenue onto the plane. One is to have high fares and few passengers. The other, a lot of passengers at a low fare. We've seen an increase in service between Portland and both Burbank and Las Vegas that began in June. That brought down overall fares in the whole region, and Avelo had to lower fares to better compete. So we did see some impact from that, but we're averaging 117 people per flight. The plane seats 147, so we still have a 30-person gap on the average flight. If that gap were 10, or rather even 20, we wouldn't be paying any of that revenue guarantee fund. So we're still lower in terms of total passengers at the fare that most will pay than we need to be to break even. Having said that, Burbank performs exceptionally well. Las Vegas doesn't perform quite as well. And so we're seeing more of the guarantee used on Las Vegas. Still, I want to underscore no concern about the performance of the service and no concern about the service continuing when the revenue guarantee is finished. No concern about that.
Okay, thank you. And just for the public's sake, for those who don't follow this that closely, that MRG is private money combined with federal money, no city money. So that's really clear for folks.
And no tax money, Mr. Mayor, because the federal grant program is funded through actually overflight of foreign carriers through U.S. airspace.
I didn't know that.
So foreign carriers are paying for our grant.
Interesting. I did not know that
Yeah,
fact.
zero
Thank you.
tax money.
Thank you. Do others have questions? Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you for this great presentation. I get asked questions about commercial air service all the time, so this information is very handy. So I also had a question about the MRG. In our efforts to recruit an additional airline, would you need to form a completely new MRG for a new airline coming in, or a new carrier, excuse me?
It's certainly possible. Other communities have these guarantees that are significantly larger than what we had available even for Avelo. As the American Rescue Plan winds down, a lot of communities are putting very large remaining amounts of money into guarantees. So when we're recruiting right now, there are communities that have $4 and $5 million guarantees. And those are very attractive.
Yeah.
So our business case is stronger than those communities, but $5 million could last a long time. So it is highly possible that we will be seeking other funds for future flights.
The second question I had to do, again, I am optimistic about us attracting another carrier. We have one gate currently. At what point in time would we have to consider terminal expansion? Would that be, I'm wondering, is this a chicken or egg question? Do you attract an additional carrier and then wait for those flights to prove themselves and then expand the terminal? Or do you expand the terminal to help attract another carrier there? What would you recommend?
Typically, the model that we use, and we're doing this in a couple of other markets right now that just got their second carrier, is that we'll do schedule coordination for a period. I don't think, knowing every community's budget challenges, it makes a lot of sense to build something hoping that a carrier, even in this case, we waited until we knew the carrier was coming before before you decided to make changes and upgrade the terminal. In this specific case, we can coordinate We have room for more parking, and we can coordinate those until it's necessary.
Yeah, and that was how I was leaning, but I wanted to hear what your response to that would be. Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. I too want to thank you for the great presentation. I'd like a little bit more details, if you have it, on the statement that 19 million has come into the community, and then you specified into the county. And so I just want to see if you can give us maybe a little bit more information of who's coming. Are they going to the coast? Are they going to the vineyards? Are they staying in Salem? Are they staying with family? I know that that's hard to get those details. And what I'm questioning is, does the city businesses, restaurants and hotels, have they felt this? That's what I'm trying to find out.
So what we know for sure is the exact number of people who have flown from Burbank and from Las Vegas who live in those communities and landed here. We know that number for sure. We don't know exactly where every single one ends up. So I can't tell you, is Lincoln City seeing a huge impact, or is it Salem? What we can do with software that's available, based on how passengers behave all over Oregon and all over the West, is estimate where the impact is happening. And so we can, through Travel Oregon data and through data that's available through a software company called Implan that does economic impact data that the state uses as well, we can estimate the impact on Marion County. And that's where that number comes from, that 19.3 million. It's based on an average visitor spend, a dilution on new visitors because some are staying with grandparents, whatever. Like I mentioned, staying with friends, not staying in hotels. So we take that number down and work out an average number per visitor who is estimated to stay in Marion County. And we believe of those that come in, 85% stay in Marion County. We are seeing a much higher proportion of Marion County-based travel than we anticipated. We anticipated about 40% of passengers would come from the Portland Metro. And that number we're seeing is less than 10% right now. And so that means a bigger and outsized impact on Marion County rather than a bunch of people driving to Portland. So I wish I could be more specific, but we can only narrow it down to the county.
Thank you.
Councilor Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. At the risk of phrasing this in an awkward way, I'm going to start with a comment. It feels like this was done very efficiently and with a very lean budget. Do you have any ability to provide additional context on how efficient and or lean our budget was with the success we've had?
John, you had all the money you wanted, right? I mean, come on. Lean is being generous. This was done, you guys were very efficient. I am surprised at the budget that got this done. That's the only way to put it. I think everybody who's been involved in the project should be really commended, because to be able to squeeze the cost out, and squeezing the cost out is very important to the carrier too, because the carrier is going to be paying to use the facility. We want to keep that cost as low as possible, and you've been able to do it. I had been preaching the whole time, nobody goes to an airport to hang out in an airport. It really doesn't matter what the airport looks like. It matters where the flight goes and what the price is. That's what matters. That's been proven. And I think that, we stay with that strategy as we move forward.
Thank you for those comments. I had coffee the other day with a representative from one of our local, very large institutions here in our city. Maybe our second largest institution. And he mentioned to me that he had recently flown out of our airport, and he said it's the best airport experience he had ever had. That was just last week. He was telling me that. And I think that people, we're so used to driving up I-5, sitting in Wilsonville for a half an hour or so, getting onto 205, doing the slog, finding parking, getting on the shuttle, doing the thing. But when you go to our airport, it's 15 minutes from anywhere in town because it's so centrally located. You can be there so fast, and you can get a ride anytime to the airport here because it's so convenient. And I think that's a really great thing, and it's also been an impact on anticipated revenue because we really thought that people would behave like they do when they go to Portland, which is to drive and park and pay a lot of money to park. And they're not doing that at our airport so much because it's so conveniently located. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on parking revenue and what we might expect in the future on that.
So the parking revenue has been lower than we all expected and we all forecast for the very reasons you point out, and the fact that we have fewer people coming from Wilsonville and using this airport because the seats are being purchased by people who live here. Now, that's what we want. We want people from Salem to be the ones who benefit from their airport. But the ones from Wilsonville are the ones who park here because friends aren't going to drive somebody down. And we're seeing much higher proportion of drop-offs. So I think a couple of things are going to happen. We're getting more ingrained as a destination. Rental car revenue is going to increase per flight over time. And so we're going to see higher numbers there. We're going to need more frequency to get that parking revenue up. It's going to simply be a factor of how many flights we've got. That's taking longer. I don't see that trajectory really changing.
Thank you. I ask every friend I hear that's going to Vegas for some reason, I say, did you fly out of Salem? It's probably about 50-50. And every time I ask, when they say no, they went to Portland, I ask why. And it's either frequent flyer miles or they couldn't make the schedule work for their plans. So those are the two things that I hear on why people don't. But I haven't heard anybody who's had a negative experience at our airport so far that's used our service. So I'm not going to mention the first flight issues we had on the way home, but the airport experience was amazing. So, any other questions? Thank you so much for this, and thank you for all of your help with getting our air service off the ground. All right. Next up, we are on to item 5B. That's Robin Dahlke and the FEMA National Flood Insurance Program, Endangered Species Act integration. Hit that button for me. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, Mayor. Evening, councilors. My name is Robin Dahlke. I am the Development Services Operations Manager and Floodplain Administrator with the City of Salem. Before we begin tonight, I want to provide a little bit of background and context. I've brought this topic to Council and Planning Commission before, but a lot's been happening recently. So I just wanted to fill the Council and Mayor in on the status today. So starting back in July, we received a letter informing us that as a National Flood Insurance Program NFIP participating community, we had to take specific actions to comply with the Federal Endangered Species Act, which I'll reference as ESA. This stems from a lawsuit against FEMA for non-compliance with the ESA, requiring them to create and implement a compliance plan.
Robin, if I could interrupt you for 1 second. If I could just remind Council that you all have an acronym guide on your desks. If you're having difficulty with all the federal acronyms, you have a little cheat sheet.
There are a lot. So yes, I think I'll reference most of those tonight, but I'll try to be brief and not spend too much time on acronyms. So the city was given 3 options in this July letter. We'll discuss those in a little bit more detail tonight, but since we've received this letter, we've sort of held off on bringing this to council because there was so much in motion that I wanted to make sure we had a real good understanding of what our options were before we presented a recommendation. So we have attended every FEMA course, webinar, call that's been offered, staff has. We've coordinated with other Oregon communities. We've closely followed the program changes to best evaluate options for you, and we've looked at the legal implications with help from our city attorney. There's also been some state and regional advocacy, which you may have seen. 2 letters were sent to FEMA's administration. One was from Oregon congressional delegation in August, and then Governor Kotek sent a letter in September. When I submitted this staff report initially, we hadn't received a response, but we have since received a response from FEMA to Governor Kotek's letter. I should say that both letters highlighted the unrealistic timelines and abrupt rollout of FEMA's requirements. The letters urged FEMA to provide more time for jurisdictions to choose a compliance option, and suggested working with state agencies to develop a statewide regulatory package. This impacts about 70% of our developed communities in Oregon, so it's a huge impact on most counties in Oregon. In the response letter from FEMA, they acknowledged the challenges posed by the deadlines, but emphasized the need to adhere to the ESA compliance schedule they had provided. Many cities, as I understand, who are overwhelmed by these requirements are taking the wait and see approach, hoping that state pressure will lead to a timeline delay. It's not looking that way, so we feel it's imperative to move forward with the selection and implementation and contact with FEMA with a very fast approaching deadline of December 1st. I tried to bring this last time and I got pushed, sorry. So at this point, I will go through a brief presentation that I've prepared and be available after for questions. I want to start with providing a little bit more background on the FEMA and ESA requirements, summarize the impacts specific to Salem, go over some of the compliance options, and provide a timeline with staff recommendation. So as I mentioned, a lot of acronyms, but please reference or let me know if we have questions as I go. The federal government's known for their acronyms. So to qualify for federally backed flood insurance, communities must participate in the National Flood Insurance Program and enforce regulations within the Special Flood Hazard Area, the SFHA. And that area, which is a term that you started to hear in place of floodplain, but that's the 100-year flood, which is a former term for a special flood hazard area, also known as the 1% annual chance flood. So Salem joined the NFIP in 1979 and has maintained good standing in the program ever since. As part of the program, FEMA introduced new requirements for habitat assessments and mitigation to be performed for all developments in the SFHA. And I will very quickly run through the background of that. The new requirement came from more than a decade-long process in response to a lawsuit filed against FEMA in 2009 by several environmental groups for failure to consult with the Endangered Species Act, Section 7. The settlement agreement required FEMA request formal consultation from the National Marine Fisheries Service, NIMFS, on aspects of the NFIP. NIMFS then issued a 2016 biological opinion on the NFIP in Oregon, and this led to the development of the draft Oregon implementation plan in 2021 to ensure NFIP compliance with ESA requirements. The plan establishes performance standards for NFIP participating communities to protect ESA-listed species and their habitats. Those species are 16 listed fish and the southern resident killer whale. The floodplain functions that the plan is looking to protect are flood storage, water quality, and riparian vegetation. It also provides examples of potentially harmful development activities, including the placement of fill, addition of impervious surfaces, and removal of vegetation. These requirements would be in addition to the existing flood zone standards that we already have in place, and those primarily regulate construction materials, methods, and finished floor elevations for development in the floodplain. So we've known this was coming, and we've had some time to analyze the impacts to Salem. We're continuing to do so, but
we know we have quite a bit of floodplain. I know from a scale of this size, it doesn't look like a lot, but it runs the corridors of a lot of our developed parts of Salem. So we have 4,000 acres of property within our city limits that are identified as that SFHA area, and nearly 3,000 existing structures in that area based on our last count, which was this year. Most of the remaining special flood hazard areas that are undeveloped today are within public zones that are generally reserved for parkland or open space. So for reference, Minto Brown Island Park is over 1,000 acres of land in the special flood hazard area, and it's not zoned for denser development. However, we do have approximately 800 undeveloped acres zoned as residential, mixed use, industrial, and commercial land. On a recent audit of our permit system, the city processes 150 to 200 floodplain development reviews annually, with approximately 4 to 5 structural permits issued each year. To put this into perspective, we issue an average of 400 new dwelling permits each year, so only about 1% of those permits are in the floodplain, the regulated area. The majority of those 100 to 50 to 200 permit reviews are reviews to existing buildings, utility repair work, and most of that type of activity would not be regulated under this new standard. We're looking primarily at new impervious surfaces, addition to footprints of buildings, and new structures, removal of vegetation. So the new requirements we're discussing tonight impact all areas within the special flood hazard area, but FEMA has identified a 170-foot riparian buffer zone that will have higher scrutiny and mitigation standards. Staff has reviewed the impacts of this buffer and prepared a buffered floodplain area that highlights that 170-foot buffer zone. It's hard to see on the small scale, but I've highlighted an example in this slide. The yellow star is where we sit tonight in council chambers. The blue areas are the buffer zone, and the red outlines are buildings that we have buffered to be impacted by that zone if development activity is proposed on any of those buildings. So both the existing structures and buildings would be impacted, and the areas in blue if there was development activity to occur in those areas. The outer boundary of this buffer zone is measured from the ordinary high water mark of all regulated water bodies and extends for 170 feet on all boundaries or each side. So a linear channel waterway would have a minimum 340-foot buffer, not including the channel width. So we'd look at that width plus the 170 on either side. Development that occurs in this area would require no net loss of floodplain functions. And again, that's the flood storage, water quality, treatment of those impervious surfaces, and removal of vegetation. As well as an additional standard of beneficial gain. FEMA defines beneficial gain standard as 5% of the riparian buffer zone. That 5% of that area within the buffer should be planted with a mix of on-site native riparian vegetation that's optimized for site conditions and use. So it's increasing the landscaping standards and planting standards to what we have in our current code and regulations. FEMA is allowing communities to adopt a different riparian buffer zone under a custom community path option, but this would likely require us to complete our Goal 5 inventory process. We're just in phase 1 of that right now, and we don't expect to have that survey work done that could help us prepare maps until phase 2, which we're anticipating is 2026. So really those would need to go hand in hand, I think, for us to be able to present something to FEMA that could be adopted as a custom approach. But we're definitely thinking about how those two could work together and be really beneficial to our community to be more custom instead of a swath of buffer zone that is not specific to areas in Salem.
Robin, if we choose one path tonight, can we change once we have that inventory done?
We can.
Okay.
Yes, and we're not at the point where they're offering the custom community path. That would be in our long-term implementation measures, which I'll talk a little briefly on the timeline, which is expected in 2027. But yes, we can change our path at any time.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, FEMA has given us 3 options for compliance. Prohibit all new development, adopt model ordinance has been prepared by FEMA, or take the permit by a permit approach. These are the
confusion in the staff report, but I'll keep it consistent in this. So the first option, prohibit development. So I think there's an obvious regulatory takings issue if we were to adopt a prohibition on development in the floodplain. It's likely to lead to legal challenges. I know a few communities in Oregon are taking this approach, but they're communities that only have a few acres or have very few developable parcels that are not already identified as open space. So it would be very difficult for Salem with our 4,000 acres to take this approach. It would affect housing production, development of other uses, not to mention the impacts of projects that have already gone through the first stages of development and received land use approvals for uses in the floodplain. A lot of those have applied for permits and will have vested permit dates, but ones that have not, that would be really challenging to apply a prohibition. The second option is to adopt the FEMA prepared model ordinance. This would require the city to amend our current code, which is Salem Revised Code Chapter 601, and it would revise to include the standards for flood storage, water quality, and habitat conservation, as well as mitigation ratios and quite a few other things. It was included in your staff report as an attachment. It's lengthy, but the first version includes standards that are not, in our opinion, clear and objective. They conflict with existing code chapters, and they really lack guidance and flexibility. FEMA also has announced in the past week that they will be publishing a new model ordinance in December. So again, really difficult for me to recommend that we take that approach when we haven't really seen a final version that's going to be acceptable to FEMA. And that third option is the option that we're recommending tonight, which is the permit by permit approach. This requires applicants submit an assessment that reviews the impacts to species and habitat on their site. There's a comprehensive review process for both the city and the applicant, but FEMA's recently provided a guidance document and some example assessments that we believe we can turn into templates and make the process simpler for smaller projects, residential developers, or smaller scale developments, and then have that option, habitat assessment, as a guide for larger projects to use a consultant to work through the process for assessing their property. So what are the implications of noncompliance? First, our current floodplain program would become non-compliant with the NFIP. Compliance with statewide planning goal 7 and the city's comprehensive plan would also require amendments. FEMA would likely start and have told us they would start the audit process, which could result in sanction. It's a lengthy process. It's a 3-step. First, it's an audit, then it's a follow-up, and then it's enforcement and possibly sanctions. And if we were to receive a sanction, property owners and the SFHA would lose access to all new NFIP policies. Existing policies could not be renewed. And for some context, we have approximately 830 policies that are active, covering $220 million in property value in Salem, Polk, and Marion counties. So this is a timeline that FEMA has prepared with Salem's proposed actions in red. So we need to report our preferred option to FEMA in 4 days, I think, if I know the date. Floodplain development permit data collection will begin January 31st, with reporting to FEMA starting the following year, January 31st, 2026. That data would be available to NIMPS and FEMA and could result in the audit that we talked about if the data isn't compliant with the implementation plans. If option 3 is chosen, staff will begin drafting a minimal ordinance update to require habitat assessments for developing the floodplain. Staff will be asking for voluntary compliance until the ordinance updates are adopted, which will likely be in early spring of 2025. So to conclude, our staff recommendation is to proceed with option 3, the permit by permit approach. We would notify FEMA, begin drafting proposed code amendments for Planning Commission and City Council approval. That would include a DLCD notice and outreach and a hearing. We hope to implement changes in early spring to remain in compliance. And tonight we are seeking direction from council on the preferred compliance option. So thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Well, thank you. You've given us several options, but really only one option, seems like.
Did you see how I did that?
Nicely done. Nicely done. Lots of options. You can't take any of them, just the one. Questions for Robin? Councilor Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. It really does help kind of organize this. I think I'm almost certainly in favor of option 3 as you recommend. But that being said, let me try to understand option 3 a little bit more. When we say permit by permit approach, is that like when something is being developed or being reviewed and a permit is being requested that we then go through this process? Or is there going to be a systematic thing where all 4,000 acres go through that one at a time?
It would be when development's proposed.
Okay.
So when someone's applying for regulated development activity, we would
Okay.
do the permit by permit.
So if something is already there and existing, they don't have to do anything unless they have to go through a permitting process.
Exactly. And even like I mentioned, if it's a tenant improvement to the hospital, if it's all interior, they're not going through a habitat assessment because it's no impact to the exterior of that structure.
Cool. Thank you.
Councilor Varney.
Thank you. I was just curious, in the staff report under the pre-implementation compliance measure timeline, it says that if we don't adopt and implement a PICM option by December 1st, we default to the permit by permit approach, option 3. So why are we making a decision if we default to that anyway? Just curious.
By giving FEMA a formal response, I think it's showing that we're making our best efforts to comply and that we are building a path for compliance. That it also, FEMA has acknowledge and understand that a lot of communities cannot adopt code amendments or these standards by December 1st. So it's building our case that we are taking that proactive approach to getting into compliance through different methods and means. But yeah, it is, we would default to the option that I'm recommending tonight.
Other questions? Councilor Hoy.
Thank you. Robin, you and I have spoken before about how Oregon is special and we get to do this first. Isn't that right?
Not first. So, and I've looked a bit more into it. Okay. Washington would be what was most familiar, I think, for the first. But there's been lawsuits that have been pending or settled with California, Florida, New Mexico, Arizona. So the same environmental groups are filing lawsuit for other states that have protected species and filing those lawsuits against FEMA and the NFIP.
Okay, well, I just want to say thank you. It seems like a lot to take on very fast.
Yes.
And you guys have obviously done a great job. And I too am in favor of committing so that they see that in good faith. Mm-hmm. And the acronym sheet, what a gift. Thank you for that. It made it really easy to follow along. I appreciate that.
Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you so much. Under the permit by permit approach, this requires applicants to prepare habitat assessments. And you go on to say that small residential projects will have the option to complete a standard assessment form, but larger development projects with a potential for greater impacts will have the option to retain a consultant to use the guidance materials while preparing their assessment. The only reason why I'm quoting from your report on this is additional assessments and permitting requirements, while important, they do add time to projects, and adding time adds money to projects. So if we are to pursue and vote in favor of this permit by permit approach, how can we work with those who want to develop properties in our area to help, make that process smooth? We want them to comply with that. Developers want to comply with that. How can we minimize the additional time and expense from having this permit by permit approach?
A lot of ideas, and I'm welcome to taking more, but I think giving the opportunity for questions and feedback very early on in the process, definitely at the pre-application conference phase of a development project. Anytime someone mentions floodplain at the counter, we'll be handing them guides and information, outreach on our web. And I think the goal of creating a template would be that it's not the fetch a rock, here's a guidance document. We would provide them a very clear template of the information they need to include.
what impervious area are you adding? Can we help you with a map? What existing trees, are you taking any trees out? If no, you don't even need to address that. Going through that with them as much as staff can. And on the larger sites, my experience with floodplain development reviews, which I've been doing for quite a while, is that they already were doing these assessments, especially those larger sites adjacent to waterway. The ESA protections are not new, and they were required for anyone applying for a letter of map revision to remove properties from floodplains when they did do fill. So they're not, I would say, a new requirement for some of those larger developers, but it definitely will be for the residential homeowners who just want to pave an RV pad and have no idea what a habitat assessment would entail. And we'll help those homeowners definitely, and anyone else that we can at smaller scale, to get this done quickly and efficiently. And I'm hoping in that first 10-day committed review we do for residential projects, getting all that information to them and committed, and then hopefully a few blanks might get filled out and it shouldn't delay the process, is my hope. But we're hoping that, without those templates being created yet, FEMA could always introduce a new option that we haven't seen, but we're trying to avoid that.
Additional questions? Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you. Rob and I want to thank you for the report, both written and the acronyms. I know that both Councilor Barney and Councilor Phillips and myself, when we read this and were preparing, it was a little confusing. So again, thank you for the correction on the option.
I don't know how we all missed that. I'm sorry.
and so I was glad to have reached out and got that corrected. Anyway, good job. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you. I don't know where to look in the report to find it right this second, but did you say something about they're amending their map again, or they will be, or option 2?
Mindy, the model ordinance. Yes. So not the maps, but the model ordinance language that they proposed that was attached in the report. After feedback, they had announced about a week ago that they'd be publishing a new model ordinance for us to review. So like I said, we could look at that ordinance and decide it's good and more clear and objective, and maybe want to take that approach. But what I don't think is clear is that the model ordinance approach still requires a habitat assessment for each site to make sure you meet the mitigation standards in that ordinance. And to me, they're really no different. And I think that may be one of the things that's highlighted in some of these changes.
Further questions? All right, Councilor Nishioka, do you have a motion?
Yes, I do. I move to direct staff to notify FEMA that the City of Salem is proceeding with the NFIP pre-implementation measure option 3 permit by permit approach.
Second.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Phillips. Councilor, do you have anything further for your motion?
I do not.
Is there further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Gwynn.
Aye.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Nishioka.
Aye.
Mayor Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Robin, for making that digestible and understandable. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Next up is item 5C. That's the presentation of proposed solid waste transfer station in Polk County. Ryan Zink.
I remember this time.
Nice.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Zink. I'm the franchise administrator for the City of Salem. Good evening, Mayor, councilors. I'm going to keep my comments very brief because I'm just the opening act for what comes next. But just very briefly how we got here tonight. So city staff met with Polk County staff here in July to hear about a proposal to site a solid waste solid waste transfer station in Polk County. That proposal is from Apple Tree Holdings. Again, in August, we met. They came to our solid waste committee and made that same proposal, a presentation about the proposal in Polk County. And the Solid Waste Committee recommended that be brought to the City Council tonight so we can all see what is being proposed. So anyway, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Austin McGuigan from Polk County.
Before you do that, Ryan,
Yes.
just to be clear for council, you're not asking us to make any decisions tonight. This is strictly informational?
Absolutely. So this is information only, and I think it'll be clear that this is the very first step in a multi-year process leading up to that. So yes, not asking for any motions this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, councilors, Mayor Hoy. I'm Austin McGuigan. I'm the Director of Community Development for Polk County, and I plan to give you a very brief update on this opportunity that Polk County has received to franchise a solid waste transfer facility in the Polk County Waste Shed. And I am going to try to get a sense of the interest that the City of Salem City Council has as an important stakeholder regarding your willingness to continue to explore this opportunity with Polk County, but no motions.
Thank you.
And so just very briefly, the Polk County Comprehensive Plan identifies the need for a solid waste transfer facility in the Rick Rial area in Polk County. And this has been in our comprehensive plan since the 1980s. We've been very fortunate in the Polk County Waste Shed that we have very close proximity to the Coffin Butte landfill. And so our franchise haulers, like your franchise haulers in Polk County and all the cities in Polk County, have the ability to essentially take the trucks directly from collecting to the landfill to tip at the landfill. But what's happening is we're starting to approach the end of life at the Coffin Butte landfill. And Republic Services that manages that has identified a 12-year life expectancy of the landfill right now. And they've submitted a conditional use permit application with the County of Benton County in order to get an extension of 6 additional years to the existing airspace that's left. And so that's really not a lot of time. It takes years in order to be able to site a transfer facility and get through the local planning, permitting process and actually get it built. And so we have an interest in Polk County to try to site one of these. Marion County has 2 transfer facilities. I think that they're looking at exploring the opportunity to construct more transfer facilities, and they also have an incinerator. And that incinerator, as you're aware, has announced that will be closing. Also, what's happened in the solid waste industry in our region is the Riverbend landfill in Yamhill County has closed for our commercial haulers, which is putting additional pressure on Coffin Butte. And so in Marion County, your residents that reside in Marion County, they pay a little bit more in terms of the rates that they pay for solid waste collection because they have access to a pretty robust solid waste infrastructure with those additional transfer facilities I was referring to. They also have a small landfill and the incinerator. We don't have any of that infrastructure in Polk County, and so we really lack that resiliency, and that's why the Polk County Comprehensive Plan really calls for the need for a transfer facility. We've received an application. It was an unsolicited application from the private sector, and with me today is Mr. Nicholas Dahl, who is the owner of Rehub, which is the company that's proposing essentially to construct and operate a transfer facility in Polk County. What they're proposing would have an impact on our rates, the ratepayers in Polk County, and Polk County has an interest to keep those rates for our ratepayers as low as possible. In order for our rates to be as low as possible, we really would need all of the waste in our waste shed to go through this facility. And Marion County, as I was mentioning earlier, they benefit from what's called flow control. The Oregon legislature has empowered the Marion County Board of Commissioners with the ability to mandate where all franchise haulers in their waste shed take their waste. We don't have that benefit anywhere else in the state, including Polk County. And so really, if in order to keep those rates low, the number of our stakeholder cities that are willing to essentially direct their franchise haulers to utilize the facility is going to determine the ultimate rates for those that want to benefit from that transfer facility. And that's going to be very, very important information with our Polk County Board of Commissioners when they begin to hold their own public hearings to determine whether or not to grant the franchise. And so What that essentially is going to mean, or how we would try to accomplish that in Polk County, or what we're proposing or thinking at the staff level, would be intergovernmental agreements where the cities are able to essentially identify what type of waste under what circumstances and what conditions and what their needs are, and an IGA, and we utilize those IGAs essentially to direct waste to the facilities for those jurisdictions that are interested in participating. So with that, Polk County has hired an independent consultant to evaluate the potential rate impacts. The applicant has provided the county with their projected rate impacts. We've had our consultant that you also utilize as a city to consult you on rate increases for your franchises, Mr. Chris Bell, who's an accountant in the solid waste industry. He's evaluated the rates that were provided by the applicant and provided some adjustments, and then he's also providing some additional services to one of your solid waste haulers, Valley Recycling and Garbage. They are doing a custom, the consultant we've hired is doing essentially a custom rate impact profile based on the variables that they really want to put in there. And so we're in the process at the county to provide some resources to our franchise haulers, your franchise haulers, to be able to evaluate this proposal, and to your cities. We've provided this information to Mr. Ryan Zink in order for him to be able to evaluate it and hopefully ultimately come back so that we can get a motion as to whether or not you have an interest in pursuing an IGA with Polk County to take advantage of this opportunity, potentially. And so with that, I want to make sure that there's some time for questions and give an opportunity to Mr. Nicholas Dahl. He's provided a slide deck that should be in your packets, and he can quickly walk you through that, and hopefully we can answer some questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Austin. Mayor, city councilors, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it. I'm going to kind of move through this quickly because I recognize you guys are on a tight time frame tonight, and I mean, you're facing the budget tight timeline with the library and everything else, so we've got some priorities here. And this is just garbage, but for me, it's important, all right? So, who are we? Wow. So, anyhow, okay. Well, I'm going to skip a little bit here. Apple Tree Companies, Nick Dahl. Been in the waste industry about 3 generations here. And this is our holdings and the different partnerships that we currently have. Multiple generations in the waste. Have a very in-depth management team that is part of my companies. We are local ownership, local solutions here for Oregon in the waste industry. Your current waste system in Polk County, let's talk about that right now. Right now you have multiple communities in Polk County that move their waste into multiple different end markets. And those challenges with those multiple different end markets, as Austin just alluded to, Riverbend's closure, Cavanta's announced closure. We have Coffin Butte landfill that's currently going in for an expansion, but they have 10 years worth of capacity left, about 13 million tons. And so they are filling up quite fast. And that's without Cavanta's tons going into them. A future system, so when you put into a transfer station into a system, it allows for all that material to come to one central location. So it creates a very efficient, environmentally friendly system. And then at that point, it's rebulked and moved to end markets. And those end markets can be in Eastern Oregon. They can be in a lot of different areas that are much more friendly to landfills, have a lot of life and capacity left. There's hundreds of years of life in the Eastern Oregon area in Eastern Washington. Over here on the west side, we deal with a lot of leachate. I know that's been a challenge with our landfills. Coffin Butte produces about 30 to 40 million gallons a year of leachate. So it's quite a lot of leachate, and then also our methane challenges. Okay, siting a waste facility. Why are we talking about tonight, and we're not talking about in 10 years when Coffin Butte actually closes? Well, we actually started working on siting a waste facility in 2018, and that is identifying properties, doing our due diligence with the different properties, and then finally locating, well, we had a couple different properties tied up, but finally locating one that actually works and makes it through the due diligence that we have to do on our side of the world, just to look to see if it's even conducive to a waste facility, to position a waste facility on it. So at that point, you go through the next steps, which is the planning, permitting, and that takes a couple years. We're almost, this April will be 2 years into this planning, permitting process, and that involves operation plans, involves all the environmental pieces of it, involves IGAs with cities. There's a quite in-depth involved process that we have to go through in order to do this. And then from that point, it involves 3 years worth of construction in order to get all the environmental pieces into play, the leachate containments, the buildings, the ducting to make sure we can pull all the smells and airs back in to the building to make sure we don't have any odor issues for our neighbors, and just really be a good environmental player and live in harmony with our neighborhoods that we are part of. Okay, so why haven't we looked at this before? And really when it was identified in the 1970s. Well, when you build waste infrastructure, it's extremely expensive, and there's an additional cost. And we had cheap landfill space in the western Oregon area. And that was Riverbend, Coffin Butte, Covanta. We had 3 end markets right here. Well, with Riverbend closing, Covanta closing, or at least announced closure, and then we're looking at the end of life for Coffin Butte, suddenly your costs start to come up for that remaining airspace becomes very expensive, right? Everybody wants it. Everybody wants to put a ton in it. And so at that point, you got to start looking at your options. And as that keeps coming up and expenses keep going up for that cost of airspace, that cost of infrastructure comes across. And at that point, it makes a lot of financial sense to build a transfer facility or invest in a waste infrastructure. Well, we are entering that critical point right now. Okay, so let's talk about early transfer stations. People are familiar with earlier transfer stations, a lot of first generation kind of transfer stations. They were more open top. They got rid of the local landfill. So before subtile deregulations, we had what was called localized landfills. A lot of communities had them. Monmouth had a localized landfill. So you were able to get rid of your waste right there in your local landfills. Then at that point, a lot of those localized landfills closed, and we built first generation transfer stations. And it mainly dealt with single stream. All your waste went to one spot. It was all condensed, and it was put in a hole. We reloaded into trailers up the weight, and then they were transported to a landfill. Well, as the waste stream has continued to evolve, we've had to evolve as an industry too. We went into second generation transfer stations, which was when you started seeing a lot more of your early 90 recycling programs starting to come on. We're starting to handle more waste streams, and so we're starting to have to design our transfer stations differently, and we're starting to have to deal with different vector challenges like rodents, smells, other stuff like that. So then you kind of go into more of a third generation transfer station where a lot more happened indoors. So everything was kind of headed indoors with these. And that's also to help out with environmental challenges on the West Coast. We have a lot of rain over here in Western Oregon that we have to deal with. So keeping that water out of and off your tipping floors is absolutely critical, so you minimize leachate generation. And then now we're into the 5th generation waste facility. And this is your newest kind of transfer station out there. And that's what we're proposing for Polk County. And they're designed to operate in harmony with your local community and surrounding environment. There's long-term efficiencies that are created by them, and with the rebulking into multiple different streams, right? So as your producer take-back programs continue to evolve, your economy is eventually going to become circular. Well, what's been built on the front side of your economy has to be built on the back side. So basically, these are becoming reverse distribution centers, and where we rebulk and then we ship it back out. Now, part of it will go to a landfill, part of it will go compost facilities, part of it will go down to commingled MRFs, dry waste MRFs. There will be electronics headed out. I mean, a lot of this is going to multiple different end markets nowadays. But you have to have infrastructure in order to rebulk this material to be able to get it out. And it's absolutely critical as we design more and more of these programs, and as the state legislature continues to push these kind of programs, that we have infrastructure in play to be able to tackle it. What does this mean here in Polk County? Local ownership management. You get to meet me. I'm not some Fortune 500 company, so I'm here. New tax revenue that could be invested in local communities in our state. Long-term rate stability, synergies with local businesses. We shop local. Maximize recycling and reuse within the current waste system. Efficiencies help reduce air pollution, fuel and energy use, road wear and tear. So when you rebulk everything, that drops down how much fuel we burn, how many trucks are going over your roads, and that really has a big environmental impact. And then also the benefit of this site is we're able to keep the high value and the majority of the acres on this site tillable for agricultural purposes, which is absolutely critical, right? And we're repurposing an old dairy farm. And these type of facilities help support our circular economy. So I'm going to keep it kind of short and sweet. Anyhow, I'm going to open up the...
Other questions? Councilor Varney.
I appreciate the fact that this would reduce the miles on the roads. Are you going to have some big compactors there or something?
Yeah, we are looking at compactors. So there's different options. When you ship different kind of waste materials, we look at compactors. So with your residential and commercial waste, at that point, we can actually utilize possum belly trailers and get them up to weight. So you don't have to actually compact it. You can actually save some money on that side of the world. When you're dealing with more of a dry waste or a bulk waste, we will utilize a compactor. But in the beginning, we'll be able to get everything up to weight, and we will utilize and partner up with the local MRF here in Marion County to get all the dry waste over to them. So we'll be able to keep that weight efficient. So if we're shipping all the way up the gorge with dry waste, we'd make sure it's all compacted so you could hit your 30 tons.
So would you be doing the sorting at your facility or at the MRF?
Currently, there's not enough tons in Polk County to actually be able to put on lines to sort. So there would be a pre-sort going on. So on your floor, you could high grade material. So if you had a really good woody material that made a lot of logical sense to put into a C&D MRF, you can move it to that site. And that helps with the rebulking side.
So just typical home garbage, what are you doing with that?
Typical home garbage would continue to go into a landfill at this point in time till obviously your RMA continues to develop and producer take-back programs continue to develop, and that material becomes less and less as it's going into different waste streams.
Thanks. Other questions? Councilor Varney.
Of course, since West Salem I just lost my train of thought. Would both franchises in West Salem be the only ones utilizing this?
So I've been doing a road show with all of our cities in Polk County to determine whether there's an interest in our other cities to also utilize the franchise facility, explore the utilization of the franchise facility. And the idea being that if a city with its franchises chooses not to participate, that raises the cost for all the other users, and that may determine whether or not it's viable as a matter of economy of scale for the rate elasticity that our ratepayers and the communities across Polk County are willing to pay, right? And so what we're basically asking today is for Salem is whether there's an interest with the city of Salem to explore having their two franchise haulers, so Republic and Valley Recycling and Garbage, to utilize that facility. So it would be theoretically all of the franchise haulers in the county, but it could end up being some amalgamation of just a few of those, but not all of them, and it could still be economically viable. Does that make sense?
Yep. Okay, here's the environment part of it. In your drawing, what was that big lake thing?
So that was the old lagoons of the dairy farm, and that will actually continue to stay on Louis' property right now. That is an integral part of his actual farm system, and there a lot of the water that comes out of Rickrell Creek that actually water the farm and the crops, that gets pumped into that actual lagoon, and at that point in time, it gets pumped into the fields. So he's going to stay in control of that in order to make sure it's part of his farm moving forward, which is important for us to live in harmony with the ag community.
And I want to take this opportunity to make it very clear that Polk County right now is solely considering whether to issue a franchise to this franchise applicant. We're not evaluating the siting. So Polk County would require an additional land use process in order to site at the location that the applicant is proposing here, and that would be a completely separate process than whether or not to grant a franchise. The franchise would essentially empower them to have some time in order to find a location and get it through the permitting process. And if they don't get it through the permitting process in a timely manner, then that franchise would be revoked. So I just want to be clear, this is the question at hand isn't really site specific. It's simply whether or not there's a need to franchise a transfer facility, and if we agree there is a need to franchise the facility, is this the right proposal?
But I could answer some site questions.
So the lagoon's going to continue to operate. Is it going to continue to offer its odoriferous nature to us as we drive on Highway 22?
What I understand from Louis is it's going to take a few years to flush it out. It just, you have a lot of years of buildup, and that's going to take time to flush. So,
Gotcha. Additional questions or comments? Councilor Nordyke.
So according to the staff report, the process, next step really is to begin the IGA between Polk County and all the cities involved. And so at some point, I imagine you'll be coming back here to seek an IGA from us. Do you have an approximate timeline for when you're going to be approaching cities like Salem with a proposed IGA?
So we have, we're trying to identify which cities are interested. And so far, all of the cities in Polk County have identified an interest in pursuing this. This is the last city within our jurisdiction that we're approaching to ask if there's an interest. We'll go back, I will go back before the Polk County Board of Commissioners, and I will report back to them as to where that interest lies, and that will inform their decision as to whether or not to grant the franchise. And so as we go through that process, if there is an interest to pursue potentially an IGA, we would hope to be able to work with your staff to sort of work through some drafts to really better understand what your wish list is in terms of what you see as a city would satisfy your solid waste goals and whether or not that could be met with this facility. This is a unique opportunity that you don't have with Marion County, because Marion County can just say, you take it where we say you take it. And here, I think that there's a little bit of flexibility in making sure that we're able to really accommodate what your needs are before we issue a franchise, so that we could incorporate that, if we choose to do it, into that franchise agreement with an understanding of what your needs are. So I'm doing this roadshow and this public outreach in advance of having the more robust public hearing process before our board to really get a sense of whether this is a viable proposal, so I can report to them, and what my take is on the proposal.
Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. It's fantastic. I am just thinking a lot about how we get this information into the public's sphere. I think that this runs the risk of being very bureaucratic, and we have our different cities all involved, we have our county commissioners involved, and I think it is really important that our communities hear the words that we are running out of space. And we are the only people who can change that ultimately.
Correct.
And I have a sinking feeling that this is going unheard. And we are continuing to be a consumer-driven society that continues to buy more and more and more, and continue to put out more and more waste, and not think about the end consequences on our communities, on our state. We cannot continue to load up landfills and ship things to other states. That doesn't solve any problems. Shipping it to Eastern Oregon has its own issues, and we have to think about those communities as well, very important. So I am just voicing that concern as a leader for now in the community, that I really wish that our communities would tune into this and that we would find a way to reach them with this information, because ultimately it is up to us as consumers to regulate our waste. So thank you for bringing this forward, and I wish you all the luck on this.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And I guess I would just offer, I've had the privilege of being in these chambers for almost 8 years now, and the one issue that, kind of we deal with year after year is solid waste. And one of the most challenging issues that we deal with is solid waste year after year. And the overriding theme, no matter what the makeup of the council was during that whole time, is I think everybody wanted us to be smarter as a community about our waste management. And Polk County has always been a little bit of a black hole when it comes to waste management, just because of the nature of it's much more rural, there are fewer options. To me, this kind of along the lines of what Councilor Staple had referenced, this helps us be smarter about, and it sets us up for the future as this evolves, waste management being this there. So to me, it makes sense to do this. It helps us evolve, helps us get ready to really manage our waste in a way that we don't have the opportunity, for all of Polk County right now. And so to me, this makes sense. So that's just my take on it. I don't know if other people want to give feedback. I'm not going to be here in January, so my opinion doesn't really matter. But just from having a few years on council, I can tell you, my perspective is this makes a lot of sense for our community. Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. And I have the pleasure and the honor, I would actually say, of serving on the Solid Waste Committee with Councilors Varney, Gwynn, and Hoy. And waste management is very, very challenging, and the resources that are available are also, as we already are hearing, time constrained. And so opportunities for a transfer center in an area that doesn't have it, and that it could benefit the haulers and moving, I think is really beneficial. And I hope that you are successful in pursuing this and getting it back to us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you. I just want to say out loud that it's not just garbage, and I appreciate your work. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything else for these folks?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you get what you needed?
Yep.
Great. Thank you. All right. I think we've been here about 2 hours. I think it would be really a good time for a 5-minute break. And I mean a 5-minute break, not a 10-minute 5-minute break, but a 5-minute break. So we'll just stand in recess for 5 minutes. All right, folks. We are now on to item 5D, consideration on a 5-year operating levy to fund the library, parks, and Center 50 Plus. And we have our CFO, Mr. Josh Eggleston.
Good evening, City Council. Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer. I just have a brief presentation for you this evening. As all of you are members of the Budget Committee, I won't go into this in too much depth. There was a motion at the Budget Committee to bring information back to the City Council regarding a 5-year operating levy to fund the library, parks, and Center 50 Plus to the May 2025 ballot. What is a local option levy? It's a temporary property tax, typically lasting up to 5 years. Voters decide whether to add it to the property taxes. It has to go to a general election. Generally used to fund specific services like parks, libraries, and schools. Just a little bit more for a local option levy. Compression is a concern. For the rates I've shown in your staff report, and I'll show here in a second in the slide, compression ranges from 1.7 million to 2.8 million. Across the city. Currently, we're at less than 500,000. So just as a range, this local option levy really kicks it up to many properties fall into compression, whereas right now we have a fairly select small few. And one small additional risk for a local option levy is it gets compressed first before any permanent levies. So on the Marion County side, there are no local option levies currently, but if this one were to go on the ballot and it passed, it would get compressed before any of the permanent rates. Next steps, if approved, we'd like to have a work session to discuss the levy rate specifically and the services funded. I provided some information with levy rates ranging from 55 cents to $1.05 per thousand, $10 to $18 million annually, as well as library, parks, and Center 50 Plus service costs over the next 5 years. For estimated revenue for each of those rates, 55 cents per thousand to $1.05 per thousand for the next 5 years. And then there on the far right, you can see the residential household impact for the median assessed value in Salem. It is just residential accounts. It doesn't include commercial accounts. For potential covered services, the motion from the Budget Committee included library, parks, and Center 50 Plus. I've listed out the current service level for the library, an enhanced service level that we'll talk about here in just a second, parks maintenance, parks recreation, and Center 50 Plus. There's been a little confusion, and I apologize for that in the staff report and just via testimony. So these are the net costs for these services. So you have a total expense budget and then program revenue. So this is the difference between those two. So this is the general revenues that the city uses to fund these services.
Say that one more time, Josh.
I'm going to go, this slide I think will help with it, hopefully.
Thank you.
So the library offsetting revenue for fiscal year 2026, my projection for the cost of the library is $6.14 million there on the left. The offsetting library revenues, with the largest one being the CCRLS, Chemeketa Community Regional Library Services. Everyone who lives in that district pays it on their property taxes. They have a formula. We get a fairly large chunk of funding from that service. So the 5.3 that I showed on the previous slide is the 6.14 less that 830,000 of program revenue. So it's the net subsidy of franchise fees, property taxes, general fund revenues that aren't allocated, and the difference there. So on this previous slide, just responding to the testimony, the current library budget listed there is actually the 6.1. If you add the 1.2 of enhancements, it would make it about 7.3 of a total budget for fiscal year 2026. The enhanced library services, it's simply a placeholder. We'd like to talk about it more at a work session in January. Mr. Archer has provided some information about what it might expand, and I'd lean on him to explain that if you're interested here in just a few minutes. For the financial impact, a local option levy would shift these costs from the general fund to the levy funds. Just for clarity, if you're enhancing services, those are not currently in the general fund. Those would not be an offset, which leads me to the second bullet point is in pretty much any scenario, the levy does not fully eliminate the general fund deficit. So the $18 million, $17.7 million we're estimating for next year, even when you're adding a levy that has $18 million, but you're adding services, you still don't eliminate that levy completely. And even if you did for the first year, it's still very likely that it's a property tax. It grows at the same rate as our current property tax revenue, perhaps even slower, depending on compression. You're still in that structural imbalance, so you really want to keep an eye on that. So when you're adding services, look at the full 5-year picture to make sure the levy is covering costs in that 5th year also. Election timing and costs. The February 28th, 2025 deadline to file a referral text or ballot title. So if we had a work session where you considered the levy rate and the services, we would recommend coming back at one of your February meetings, preferably the early one, to refer a ballot title to the ballot. And estimated costs, $200,000 for the election. It is a special election in May. Approximately $78,000 for mailing and $25,000 for communications. The time window is very, very short. So we're looking at not very much of, from the city perspective, ability to really influence communication in that way. That's why you see that amount being fairly low, because the window where we can actually talk about it before the ballot's referred is very short.
Josh, I have a quick question on that. We're already going to have to conduct a Ward 6 election in May, and so we already have a certain amount of cost. I don't know what that individual ward election cost is, but you could look at that as sort of offsetting this, because that's something that's not optional, right?
That is my understanding. I believe that would be $20,000 to $30,000.
Okay, I hadn't heard that cost, so, okay. 10%-ish.
Dan Atchison, City Attorney. I don't know if those costs would offset, though, because there's just the additional cost associated with the election of Ward 6. There may be some offset, but how much is undetermined.
So we'd have to pay the full $200,000 plus the $20,000 to $30,000 for Ward 6? Or, yeah. So it wouldn't be $200,000 minus the $20,000 to $30,000?
There would probably be some offset, but there's some additional separate costs that would continue on.
Okay.
And if I may, it also depends if anything else is on the ballot. So all the jurisdictions share the costs, so Marion County would divvy it up after the fact.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. That's helpful.
Just a little background. The Revenue Task Force held multiple meetings, focus groups, and town halls in 2023 and 2024, and the recommendations were presented to Council in July of 2024. A local option levy was among the key recommendations, among several others. They didn't specifically focus on community services or public safety. It was just a local option levy was a recommendation. Our staff recommendation is to authorize staff to prepare a scenario for the May 2025 election to fund the Salem Public Library, parks, and the Center 50 Plus with a 5-year operating levy for consideration at a January City Council work session. So if you vote in favor of this, it does not actually mean you're putting something on the ballot. You're just asking for additional information for a work session in January. Thank you.
Questions for Josh? Councilor Varney.
I know over the last couple of years, you have staff has pulled a lot of information together already. So I guess my question is to put this together and bring it to a work session in January. I mean, how much of a cost is that going to be? Any estimate?
It's relatively small. It's mostly staff costs. So I would say, it's not 1 hour, but it's not 100 hours.
Sure. And you've already put a lot of materials together.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for staff? Councilor Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Josh. I guess just kind of digesting the testimony that we got, in addition to all the testimony we've had over the last year and a half or 2 years. I've heard that there's some desire that it's not just to maintain levels at the 2023 library services or 2022 library services, but to get us closer to that, at least 6, but more like 7 days a week. Is this range of 55 cents to $1.05, is that sufficient to get us to that 52 to 56 hours a week for the library?
If I may, I'll speak really quick to the larger question. So it could be, it depends what else you're trying to accomplish with a levy. And that's one of the questions, are you trying to offset enough to solve more of the deficit in the general fund, or are you trying to enhance library services? So that's one of the nuances that we'd like to talk about at the work session. But I'm going to lean on Mr. Archer just for a little clarity. I think a little was already shared, but if you could add a little more.
Sure. Scott Archer, Deputy City Manager. So generally, the amount that we're looking at, this 1.2 million in addition that's proposed, we believe would get us probably back to the 2023 level of service that we had at the library. So we'd bring back the number of hours. I think where we'd have to do some additional work is what other levels of service that might include, programs or materials, which I don't think there's going to be a lot of room there. So I would suggest that it's probably going to get us back to that level, but not necessarily beyond that. I guess the question that we would need to grapple with is what, within that, if $1.2 million is the number that council would want to work with, then what exactly that buys us is what we need to figure out a little bit more. It could be 7 days a week with some different looking schedules, but there's a lot of work still to be figured out with what that looks like.
And I guess just it'd be helpful to know, and I'll be a community member in January, so this won't apply to me, but I'll be very interested in knowing, what were the hours in 2023? Now we're at 38 hours a week at the main branch, right? And then do we have a sense of how many hours we were at back in 2023 before we made the mid-year cut?
We do. Yeah, we operated at the main branch 52 hours per week. Okay. And then at West Salem, we were running at 30 hours a week, so the total was 82 hours. Right now, with the reductions that we took with the mid-year reductions in the last fiscal cycle, we're looking at, we're running 38 hours at the main library and 10 hours at the West Salem branch.
I think it would be good to have that data as part of the community conversation that's going to happen, to look at what it would take and cost to get us, I don't know what else has to be changed in terms of funding for park or other things in the general fund, but to kind of give the people in our community, like myself, who really want the library to be, as close to a fully functional library as possible, something to work for, because it's going to take a lot of community work to get anything passed. Mm-hmm. And I think I have heard multiple people in the testimony and tonight say that that's something that they could use as a selling point. So I think it would be important to have that information brought back to us.
Councilor Gwynn.
I just have a couple questions. You indicated the household impact. Do you recall what the median assessed value is?
$234,000, and that is 2023 data. We just received from the both county assessors for 2024. So when we come back in January, we'll have a little updated information, but $234,000 assessed value, not real market value.
Understood. And then you indicated that this does not include commercial properties. So are those not impacted?
Yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to clarify. So when you're talking about a household impact, it really only reflects on residential properties. So when we're looking at that median value of what to pull, I separated out just with the residential properties because it really doesn't fit the same way with commercial properties. However, the tax does apply. There is just so much more variation in commercial properties, tens of millions there. So it does apply to all properties, but the amount depicted is just for residential.
So just to be really clear, Josh, if you pay property taxes in the city of Salem, this would apply.
That is correct, unless you're one of the 4,000 properties in compression, yes.
Okay, thank you. Counselor.
So I just wonder how that impacts the projections then. If your projections don't include the commercial properties, will it be more?
Sorry, the household impact only includes the residential properties in that analysis. The revenue estimates include all properties in Salem.
So that was just an illustration to give you give
Correct.
people an idea of how it would impact a typical household. But
Yes.
the revenue is actually based on all the properties that pay taxes. It's true?
Yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you. Other questions for staff? Councilor Nordyke.
So Josh, I think something that bears repeating is whenever we are confronted with opposition to any possibility of raising revenue, we hear a lot of arguments about tightening our belts and this and that. Isn't it true that City Hall already has made millions of dollars in cuts in its most recent fiscal year?
That is correct. In fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025, the current year, there were multiple millions of dollars of reductions. We have those detailed out on the city's website.
Great, and I just want to remind folks of that this revenue measure is not being considered as a measure of first resort, but as a measure of last resort. We've already made lots of cuts. So I just want to articulate that message to the community. Thank you.
Councilor Stapleton.
I don't want to be doom and gloomy, but I'll ask you a question. What happens to, like right now we have 4,000 properties in compression. Is that primarily in Marion County?
Yes, it's only in Marion County.
Okay. And then what happens if we head into a recession? What does that do to compression?
Really good question. It would increase it, but not to the impact that we saw back in 2008, 9, 10. Just because if you've gone to look for a house lately, the house prices are pretty high. So there's a large gap for most properties between real market value and assessed value. So it's less of a risk that a recession would cause this local option levy to drop to zero, for example. But it would probably be reduced to some extent.
Thank you so much.
Further questions? Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. The Revenue Task Force did suggest that we consider a levy. And so I think that is important for all of us to remember. We also heard a lot of testimony tonight to the point of supporting Center 50 Plus. And I understand wanting to bring the library up to 7 days a week, nights. The thing that I would also want to do is be considerate of the proposal that Mr. Archer's brought forward, which is enhancing, but not maybe to that full extent so that we could continue to support Center 50. So I appreciate all of this information, and I'm sure that it'll be brought back to us at the work session if that's what we choose. One question I'd like to ask, and this is where I'm finally getting to, is the compression that we've talked about. When a property might be in compression, that would mean that we may not get quite the same amount, but we might still get some. Is that correct?
That is correct. So basically what you have is a portion of Salem that doesn't pay the tax and a larger portion that does. And as you increase that tax rate, more properties fall into compression. So it's kind of a decreasing utility as you raise the rate, which is why it's not a straight line for the revenue that's being generated.
Just to follow up with that, I know that it is difficult to know what might end up in compression. Could you give an idea that what percentage might not be seen? If some were in compression, what percentage of the anticipated revenue might not be seen?
I'm going to have to come back to you with that. I think I understand the question. So basically, a levy rate, if everything if there was no compression, how much it would generate versus what we're actually or what's possible to collect. I don't have that with me this evening, but I can certainly bring that back if you choose to pursue this.
Thank you.
Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you. When we put the bond on the ballot, the language was really important and legally binding that we produce those things for the bond. Does that same legal binding happen when you do a levy? So, for instance, when you were saying earlier that even if we were to get that amount with the levy and it passed and we were able to get that amount, that still doesn't make up the gap that we currently have in our budget. So there's still going to be cuts even if the levy passes at these current rates. So does the language on the ballot require that those services are protected from future cuts and that the cuts would need to come from elsewhere? Or does that still leave them open for cuts?
I'm going to defer to the city attorney.
Dan Atchison, City Attorney. The answer is it depends.
Typical lawyer.
So legally, we're bound by the ballot title. So whatever's in the ballot title is what you're legally obligated to do. Statements made is in the explanatory statement or statements made by council in support of it are less legally binding. So if we say in the ballot title, this will ensure level funding for the library at $10 million a year, whatever it might be, that's what we're locked into.
So we're going to be very careful with our word choice, is what I'm hearing you say.
Correct, and the ballot title's 10 words, so.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Phillips.
Yeah, I don't really have a question. I have more of a comment. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, my colleagues and staff again. When I had asked about like looking at, giving as one example of the numerous community partners that will need to be engaged for, outreach and having a chance of any levy to pass, what I have heard is, multiple, people supporting the library say that they want something that's a little bit more than what they even had in 2023. So in 2023, I think it was 52 hours a week. And I've heard that 56-hour week could get us to 7 days a week. And that gives, the people to doing the work, something to shoot for and advertise on. So that's very valuable to me. But when I made that comment, it was not to sacrifice the Center for 50 plus. It is an essential, harm reduction and community center in our community. My mom has benefited from it repeatedly. My godmother has benefited from it as we had to navigate through having that close family member kind of go through getting older and mild cognitive impairment. So, my mom still goes there for physical therapy, and it really is vital. I mean, it prevents harm, not just for the people in our community who are getting older, but the family members who are in the sandwich generation like ourselves, who've got kids and, older parents. So I don't want it cut in any scenario. I just want to make sure that, as a community member, I want that supported, and I want to see the maybe 56 hours a week in the library.
Thank you, Counselor. I appreciate your words because it is, to me, not optional to include Center 50 Plus in any scenario. It has to be included. It is such a critical service, and there's so many people that count on that service every day. I know I don't get a say in this in January, but I sincerely hope that Center 50 Plus is included in any scenario that's considered. It's so, I can't overstate its criticalness. So I said a while back as we were contemplating these levy conversations, I think the duty of this council is to set the next council up to be able to make the best decision they can make. And so tonight, I think this is a really easy question to ask staff to be ready in January for a work session and then the next council can make whatever decision they're going to make. But we need to do all we can to set them up to make that best decision. And so to me, the recommendation is a no-brainer for me, including all three of those services, those critical areas in the city. So I'm eager to vote yes on this tonight. Are there other questions from staff? Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, and I agree with you. I think all three have to be included if we do this. Josh, did it say somewhere in the survey that the people might support a levy if it were project-based or something like a library bond? Was there something in there, or a library levy? Was there something in there about that?
There could have been. I don't recall off the top of my head. I would lean on others if they have a better memory.
I see Courtney Knox-Bush approaching the lectern.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Courtney Knox-Bush, and I work in the City Manager's office. And I would like to say, yes, there were questions about priorities of different kinds of services. And it is true that we didn't see any one of the services scoring or being viewed as a priority for the majority of our residents who would be participating in a special election.
There was interest, though, aside from these three, in public safety. That was kind of
Public safety fared the best overall, yes.
Okay.
But there was no one service that was receiving a majority of support.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. And by the way, testimony from, it was Zoe, I think, tonight, was enough to make me vote yes. No, it was wonderful. Thank you.
Councilor Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilor Hoy. To the best of my recollection, when they re-asked at a smaller rate, so instead of $1.50 at closer to like 75 cents on 1,000, the library did slightly better than the other, even better than public safety, but I don't think any of these are statistically significant. I think the police or public safety was at 42 to start with, the library was at 41, and then when it went to a smaller rate, the library went up, and it was the only one that went up. So I think that might be part of the reason for focusing on it, because if these data points are true, this might be the smallest uphill battle.
I do think it's important to remember the track record of polling. No offense to our wonderful colleague, our DHM, they do a great job. But I think just in today's reality, polling should be taken with maybe a pinch of salt. Councilor Gwynn. Great, thank you. Yeah, the real deal is going to be the campaign and the work that the effort the community leaders put in, and if everybody comes together or not. That's gonna be the deal. So, go ahead.
I don't think I was on council, but no, I was. So when we did the infrastructure bond, I think we got the information that if council was divided, it wasn't going to pass.
Right.
So it would be really good for the future council that I will not be part of. If there's close to unanimity, that gives us the best possible chance of getting something
True.
accomplished.
True. Yeah. Any other questions or comments, Councilor Varney?
Well, I'm in support of getting more information for a number of reasons. Because I do want to include Center 50 Plus and the library, et cetera. But my question is, with Polk County, so with compression, are you saying then that Polk County residents would end up paying more if this passed than Marion County residents? Is that the way that works?
A really good question, and there's lots of different ways you could look at it. I'm happy to bring information back. How it works is it's based on the overlapping taxing districts, basically. So here in Salem, right where we're sitting, we're in Marion County. We're also in the CCRLS, the library, regional library system, City of Salem. So all those tax rates added up together are more than $10. On the Polk County side, they're just slightly less than $10. So properties can't be in compression with that $10 limit. So there's individual properties on the Salem side that wouldn't pay this tax if it went forward and was voted on. On the Polk County side, all properties would pay, but I don't know like the average property value. It gets me thinking way too detailed probably, but I can bring some information back on that exactly. We're not the only ones impacted by compression. Other jurisdictions are over that $10 limit, so they, Multnomah County is one where they're over the $10 limit, and you have lots of people that pay and lots of people that don't, when everyone votes.
No, thank you. I'd appreciate more information on it, because I That's a question I'm sure I'm going to get.
And it's really, as I understand your explanation, Josh, it's really a property by property issue. It's not a like everybody in Polk County and everybody in Marion County is in the same boat. It really is dependent upon where your property physically sits.
That's exactly right, and where it was at in the assessor cycle back in the 1990s when that was frozen. Some properties were assessed very highly, some are very low. So it really is an individual property assessment that causes compression.
And for those members of the public who are just now getting involved in the property tax conversation in Oregon, you realize how broken and ludicrous our system is and how arbitrary it is, just for the very thing that Josh just said. It wherever you happen to be when measures 5 and 50 passed is where you ended up in perpetuity. And it's ludicrous. Anyway. Other questions, comments? Councilor Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. The biggest group of people that actually matter in this discussion are the voters. And I worry, as much as I love the Center 50 Plus, I mean, they kept people alive during the pandemic. The library, I don't go over there very often, but when I do, it's just the activity, it's just infectious. But I just worry that nothing's gonna pass. I don't think the council's united yet. I haven't got any signs that that's gonna happen. A lot of levies failed. Chemeketa failed, which by a large margin. Woodburn has always wanted a community center. Theirs failed. So it's really surprising. So going forward, I just don't see. I don't see Salem accepting this, and that's the only reason why I just don't want to set up the next council for failure. I don't think we're ready, and we haven't, as a city, really done enough to build community trust after the Salem payroll tax. People really felt offended. People felt like we were against them, against the working class people. So that's my biggest concern. I just don't think this is going to pass. But once there's something good on the books, even though I'll be out of the council seat, I'll be there its biggest supporter. But I just don't see that with this one. So that's the reason why I'm just not going to accept this today. Thank you.
Further discussion, Councilor Gwynn.
Well, I was just going to say my concern is much like Councilor Gonzalez. We had a couple of people tonight that referred to the DHM survey where people they're just fed up with being taxed. So I hate to see us spending $300,000 to test the waters. So I'm really torn on what to do.
Yep,
so,
it's hard.
Yeah.
Any additional questions for staff? Yeah. We'll have time for discussion too after a motion, just FYI, everybody.
Just a comment to Councilor Gonzalez's statement. I hear you on that, and that bothered me more than anything with the payroll tax, was to know that we had been told it would fail if it went to the voters, and we went ahead and spent that money. So I hear you, and I don't want that to happen either. I think the thing that makes this a little bit hopeful to me is knowing the passion of the people who are in these programs, and that they can turn that passion into power and get out there and maybe we can make it happen. So I feel hopeful that way.
Any other questions for staff? Do we have a motion?
I move to authorize staff to prepare a scenario for the May 2025 election to fund the Salem Public Library, Parks, and Center 50 Plus with a 5-year operating levy for consideration at a January City Council work session.
Second.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Phillips. Councilor, to your motion.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Hoy. While I recognize that we're still trying to understand the temperament of the voters, I also feel that we have had immense testimonies and clear support for the library, Center 50 Plus, and I feel that it's worth us looking at in a work session to see if there is something that we can find that we hope might come to the voters in an agreeable way. And I feel that it's an opportunity for a lot of our citizens who maybe weren't polled to give an opportunity to make their statement. So I feel that this would be an excellent opportunity to see what we might be able to come up with.
Thank you. Is there anything further? Councilor Varney.
Thank you. I echo, well, Councilor Gonzalez's and Councilor Hoy's statement about the payroll tax. I mean, the voters have said that they don't, from the survey, that they don't want to support something like this. So it's a real struggle for me, but I want to see more information and get more details. But that all being said, I'm hopeful that by January, somebody else will step in and at least provide that $303,000 that it would cost to put it on the ballot. So.
Who might that be? I'm curious.
I mean, we expended those funds last time fully knowing that they're, you know, what the outcome was going to be. I'd rather have somebody else spend the funds this time.
Wow. Councilor Stapleton.
Yeah, I think this is like the last time I get to publicly talk about our budget, which is kind of crazy to me. I had somebody ask me, since when have you known about the struggles with the city's budget? And I said, 2018, when I was sitting in a neighborhood association meeting and the then city councilor for Ward 1 was there giving an update on the budget and the crisis that we were in and the cliff that we were facing. And after that meeting, I came down to the next city council meeting and made my voice heard on this. And I have pretty much stuck to my guns on this ever since. I really am passionate about local government and about our local government serving our residents. And when you give your all to things and you try and save the community harm by providing those services, even though it's a challenging hurdle to get over in order to fund those. You know, to Councilor Gonzalez's point and Councilor Gwen as well, and Councilor Varney, it's been a struggle for me over the last couple of months to contemplate a levy, not only because I have real concerns about compression and about levies in general, the fact that they're one-time dollars in my mind, because you have to go out for them every 5 years and you're not guaranteed that every time. And it's a lot of work to get this across the finish line the first time, but then to realize that in 4 years, you're gonna have to gear up for the next fight to get it, to keep what you've gained so far. So I typically, I have some reservations about levies in general, but obviously we've tried other ideas and that was rejected by the public. And now we have this idea. And I struggle with spending the money, even the little bit of money that it is compared to the vast budget that we have. But I really do look at the folks in this room, the folks who have emailed us, and they want an opportunity to try. And I think I was talking to Mr. Staley about this, and who am I to say you can't even try, right? We're just going to cut services and we're all just going to have to live with devastating cuts to our community, which will still most likely happen. Even if the levy passes, we will still need to make reductions in services. But I really look at the passion in the community, and I want to really lift people up who are trying to invest in the community and make it better. And I just know that not only will it take a united front on council, but Mayor-elect, it's going to take your leadership like nothing else. The bond, when we tried to get that across the finish line, Mayor Hoy, you were out there. You were championing that for months and months and months to get that across the finish line. And so it will take exceptional leadership on your part. It will take our community leaders, that many of them are here, and the volunteers that are also here. It's going to take support from the unions, and not just support silently behind the scenes in a back room cheering us on. Like out loud, boisterous, enthusiastic support. That's what we're looking for. And it's going to take support from our business community as well, in that same way. In order to get anything across the finish line, you're going to need to have that coalition built. And Mayor-elect Hoy, that's going to be falling on your shoulders to pull that together. And I'm going to be cheering for you. I know that that all of us are going to be cheering for you to make that happen. And I believe in the power of grassroots efforts. And this library group, this Center 50 group, and I know the parks, they haven't shown up with their green signs yet tonight, but I know they're out there. I know they're going to show up too. And I believe in our community. I believe in grassroots efforts. And if I can do anything but take a simple vote tonight to get more information to the next council, I am more than enthusiastic to vote yes for this, and will stand on the sidelines and cheer the loudest I can as you guys really chart a new path forward for the city.
Thank you, Councilor. I will just say that to my colleagues who are struggling with this decision, if you think this conversation or decision is hard, just wait. If it's not successful, or if you decide not to, the next council decides not to send it out, wait until you have to decide to close the library and Center 50 plus. You want to talk about hard? That's hard. And I hope we don't go there. I hope we don't get there. But that's the next decision if this doesn't work. So everybody needs to get behind making it work. So, is there anything further? Councilor Nordyke.
Before you ask for money, you need to prove that you need the money. And I know that in our council meetings, we go over in great detail our budgetary woes and have done so for quite some time. And our staff does an excellent job presenting the information. But that effort is still ongoing. That outreach effort must continue, and it must be done in a new way, because there are a lot of people who don't know that we've already made millions of dollars in cuts 2 fiscal years in a row, which is why I asked the question to which I already knew the answer tonight, to just remind folks and illustrate a point that we already are tightening our belt. We are already looking to find ways to save money. We are already cutting positions that people miss. And I also want to remind folks, we are not alone in this. You talk to any bedroom community of Salem, and they too are struggling financially. Independents proposed a $27 monthly public safety fee on their utility bills. Marion County government raised its operation fee to cover the costs of funding sheriff patrols, additional sheriff patrols in the area. Monmouth added a $10.25 monthly police fee to their electricity bills. Independents put a levy on their ballot to fund their library and their parks and their museum. So I think it's worth repeating that this is a systemic and statewide problem. Every city is struggling with it. And we are not alone. This is not just a Salem problem, because that is what folks would love to make it believe. It's like, well, you guys are the problem. You're the ones who aren't handling your money properly. We've had clean audits every single year that I've been on council and budget committee, and I started on budget committee in the year 2017. We've had clean audits every single year, like audit, handled by an independent firm. We have public meetings that have shared over and over again, and neighborhood association meetings as well. But we have to remember it's easy to get stuck in this echo chamber with the folks who are hyper engaged and hyper involved and haven't missed an election in 20 years. That's not how most people are. So the outreach message needs to come not just from us, but from trusted sources. And we saw that from information we've received in past meetings, that it helps to have trusted community leaders to help carry the water on that message. That's how Gresham, was it Gresham that passed? Gresham didn't just have its mayor and its council out in front, although they need to be, but they'd had other members of the community who were also supportive of it as well. The other thing, we all know we're all in favor of having the state find a way to pay its fair share through a public safety district. I think every single one of us is in favor of that. But timing is also a problem. If we decide to put this on the ballot next year, that decision, it must be we must meet that February 28 deadline. We're not going to know from the legislature one way or the other by February 28 how they feel about funding us. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, but I can't wait until the eve of February 28 to make my vote on that, and nor can Keith or any other member of city government. So I'm looking forward to exploring this further, and we will see what happens. And I hate to say it that way, but I am going to be continuing to do as I've always done, which is to talk to my residents and share with them everything I know, continue doing all that I can to explain to them what our city's budgetary situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councilor Phillips.
Just briefly, I'll be voting yes on this. I think it's pretty straightforward. You know, it's been brought up that we had the payroll tax and that was a cost. I can't go back in time and undo that. But if I could, this now is the option levy that I would bring forward. But I can't go back in time, so I think that this is now the best solution, or the best potential solution. And I think it is common sense that we got to hear more as a community to know what our options are, to find a way to fix some of the structural problems in our budget. I think that all the things we are potentially supporting in terms of the library, the Center for 50 Plus, and parks are things that are valued by our community and will have people that robustly support them and advocate for them. So I think there is a small chance that it really could pass. And that's incredible, especially compared to the alternative of just having to close the $17.7 million deficit that has been estimated by Josh, our CFO. So, I think that this is important to learn more. I'm enthusiastically for it. Can't go back in time and undid what we did, but I'm getting a sense that we're getting closer to consensus. So let's just take the next step.
Further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Gwynn.
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Nay.
Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Counselor Nordike.
Aye.
Counselor Varney.
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton.
Aye.
Counselor Nishioka.
Aye.
Counselor Phillips.
Aye.
Mayor Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. All right, we have no information reports, we have no ordinances, but we do have folks signed up under number 8 for public comment. First up is Chris Blackburn. As a reminder, you have 3 minutes. Please introduce yourself with your name and your address or your ward. When the yellow light starts to flash, that means you have a minute left. When the red light comes on, that means your time's up.
Chris Blackburn, Ward 1. Good evening, Mayor Hoy and City Council members. I'm here to talk about something important, making sure that Salem has housing that working families can actually afford. I'm a developer. Our Blossom project here in Salem is ready to provide exactly that, but we need your help to make it work. Let me explain our situation. When we started the project, we weren't sure if we were going to make it affordable housing, our first foray into supporting affordable housing here in Salem. So the numbers had to line up just right. We paid our SDCs on that project of $751,919 to be exact, to keep construction moving in a really difficult environment for both construction and lending. We now know we can make this work as affordable housing. We're ready to make that commitment in writing. Here's what our request, what makes our request different from other projects. We're willing to sign a legal document, a deed restriction that locks affordable housing rents for 30 years. This is not just a promise or a handshake deal, it's a binding commitment that stays with the property. You're getting a legally binding 30-year commitment for affordable housing. You're making sure that other developers can't use this as a loophole for later. The second point is crucial. We're not asking for special treatment to try and avoid fees after the fact. We're offering something valuable in return, 3 decades of affordable housing. We had the option of considering this as affordable housing. We didn't want to try and subvert the system by saying, well, we're going to delay the SDC fees, which are incredibly expensive and a big part of this component. The $751,919 won't just disappear into a developer's pocket. Every dollar goes to keeping rents affordable for Salem residents. Over the last 20 years, I've reinvested almost all the different income I've received from the projects I've done in the city of Salem right back into the community. You can probably check my track record. This helps the seniors living on Social Security, the single parents working 2 jobs, the young couples saving for their first home. Your decision tonight sets an important standard. It tells developers, yes, Salem will work with you if you make it real long-term, if you make a real long-term commitment to affordable housing. But it also says don't try and avoid fees by vague promises about affordability, which we definitely didn't do. I ask you to support this motion before you. Let everyone show that Salem is serious about affordable housing and is serious about doing it the right way. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. Just to be clear, there is no motion before us. We're not making any decisions. But I'm curious, have you talked to staff? This is, Yeah, I'll get to you, Ms. Randall. I understand you like to do your business under item number 8 for some reason these days when we really have a staff process for this. This is not the place for these kind of detailed conversations about how the policy is implemented. We make policy, we don't implement the policy. So I'm wondering, have you talked to our staff about this?
We have had the staff conversation through Brittany, yes.
Okay, and?
And it was, from what we were told, it was rejected.
Okay. Do you know why?
Reading the policy, they said, to be honest, Brittany would be able to explain that better.
Okay, we'll talk with her.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Randall, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Brittany Randall. You can find me in Ward 2. I submitted some written testimony explaining the situation a little bit further, and hopefully you received that. We have spoken to individuals in development services, and they have cited that their code currently doesn't allow a refund of this nature. But having come before you before and knowing that you are the only body that can approve refunds or fee waivers, we thought we would just bring this to you, if not to refund the SDCs paid on this project, but to bring it to your attention that this is probably something we want to revise in the code. So we're not trying to circumvent any normal channels of business by coming to speak to you. And hopefully our written testimony provided some clarity on that, but I'm here to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? I mean, we have a strong commitment to support affordable housing through SDC waivers. But to ask us to implement a particular, an application or something, that's really not our role. That's the staff's role. So I get a little bit nervous trying to get into the detail. Like, I don't know anything about, this is the first I've heard of it. I didn't see the written testimony before the meeting. So all I know is what your client and you have said. So that's why this kind of environment for this conversation is challenging. Councilor Gonzalez, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see too much as challenging. I mean, is there any staff that could answer some of these questions? I mean, if this is how the information gets to us, I'd rather get it this way, or this is what it takes. I'm okay with it. But any staff? I mean, can we have any staff answering these questions? If this is the time that we can ask.
Thank you, Councilor. Also, I see I still have a little bit of time, so maybe I can provide a little clarity about what the project is. So we permitted this 90 dwelling unit apartment complex off of Blossom Street in Northeast Salem about a year and a half ago, and it's almost finished being constructed. We didn't have the affordability piece lined up at the time that we were pulling permits, so we didn't just blanketly tell the city, okay, we'll record this and maybe have to quit claim it later because it's not affordable. So we took the route of paying the SDCs. Now it's affordable, so we would like to take advantage of the project or the program that's already in place in the city. So that's all.
Mr. Martin, I see you reaching for the microphone. Is that?
Yeah, Brian Martin, Public Works Director. So the applicants did reach out to staff about a week and a half ago is when I first heard about this. And unfortunately, our code does not allow a refund under this scenario. The only way the code allows a refund of SDCs is if a project the permit expires or the development doesn't happen before the permit expires. So there's nothing related to affordable housing. Typically, an affordable housing project has to be made affordable housing when the permits are issued and the SDCs are paid. And so we did look at it. Our code doesn't allow it. One challenge we have with SDCs is we don't collect enough to really pay for all the improvements that are needed. And so we're going to be looking at our SDC methodology this next year. And one of the things that impacts it, we support affordable housing, but when the funds don't come in because they're way for affordable housing, that means other development projects that are happening in the future, we have a hard time reimbursing for those. So if you think of it, if you think of the SDCs as like a checkbook, money comes in from developments. We try to look at our 5-year CIP and get an understanding of what's coming in versus what the expenditures we expect to go out. And so those monies don't just sit there, but it's kind of a revolving fund where we continue to reimburse folks. So had this been brought forward, a year and a half ago, I would expect that it probably would have been approved. The other thing we don't have at this point is anything that shows what is actually going to be affordable. There's no application about how many units it's going to be, what the costs are going to be. So it's really kind of a last minute, hey, we decided we want to make this affordable and we'd like to see the council do something about it. So, from a legal process, I was in communication with our city attorney, and he could maybe share a little bit more about what this looks like.
Thank you. Yes, he wants to comment.
Dan Atchison, City Attorney. So Mr. Martin correctly stated that our code, this is an exemption from the requirement to pay the SDCs. That exemption is granted or not at the time of the application. So staff doesn't have the authority to do a retroactive exemption, and frankly, council doesn't have the authority to do it unless you change the code. So it would require a code amendment and a special language in the ordinance to grant a retroactive exemption at this point.
Thank you. So what do you suggest, if anything, is there any sort of path for the applicant, or is there to have a further conversation?
The only path would be for council to amend the code.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Next up, we have Eliza Stapleton.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eliza Stapleton. I live in Ward 1. I am one of many students that walks to school every day. I have seen as well as experienced many times when cars do not stop for pedestrians. Earlier today, I was walking to an appointment on Commercial Street, and the sidewalk I was on was blocked due to construction. The construction sign instructed me to cross the street. However, I stood there for 5 minutes and no one stopped to allow me to cross. I was forced to go through the blocked off area after I examined it thoroughly to ensure I would be able to continue safely. The 2024-2025 Oregon Driver's Manual states, the term pedestrian refers to people walking as well as rolling with skateboards, scooters, and wheelchairs. You must stop for pedestrians crossing the road at any marked or unmarked crosswalk. Later on in the section, it states that there is a crosswalk at every intersection, even if it is not marked by painted lines. When I walk anywhere, whether it be downtown or school, I worry about my safety as well as the safety of others. At the blocked crosswalk, there was a sign that told me what to do, but nothing telling cars what to expect. I wonder if in the future we can alert cars to changes for pedestrians, changes for pedestrians, making it easier for pedestrians to be seen. Thank you for your time and all your hard work.
Thank you, Eliza, for your comments. And I know our Public Works Director was listening to you, so thank you. All right. We have nothing further on our agenda. We are adjourned.